A young man with dark hair thinks to himself about the heroine he loves above all else in this world, including reality itself. Her name is Alexandra Chevalier, and at this moment, she is smiling right in front of him. This world is from a game called Engage Hazard, often shortened to Inhaza. It is a chat-based romance RPG for smartphones, filled with a cast of unique and charming heroines for the player to encounter and fall in love with. In this game, the main character is presented with a single, monumental condition to become the next king. He must bring back the world's greatest fiancée. One of the characters within that story is Harold the Howls, the third prince of the Howls Kingdom, with great powers among the Western nations. A young man awakens with a jolt, covering his face as a horrifying realization dawns on him. He is that very character, Harold, the arrogant and long-winded figure known as the worst and most incompetent of princes. This truth became clear to him this very morning. He sits up abruptly in his grand bed, clutching his head. The memories of a past life have suddenly returned, revealing that he has been reincarnated into this other world. His mind flashes back to that previous life. His name was Rika Akira. He struggled with socializing and never managed to fit in during his time at university. As a result, he sought refuge in the two-dimensional world of fiction and games. It was there that he first encountered Engage Hazard. Back in the present, lying in bed, he acknowledges his obsession with the game, even admitting to spending a significant amount of money on it. But he wonders what the real problem is with being Harold. The grim answer flashes in his mind. Harold is a rival character who, driven by jealousy of the protagonist, attempts a rebellion, fails, and is executed. The young man clenches his fist, refusing to accept such a fate. He realizes he is currently 13 years old, with only 3 years left until the game's main story begins. He possessed a deep, exhaustive knowledge of this world, the world of Engage Hazard. With that knowledge, he knew he had to find a way to change his fate. His expression hardens with resolve. He would not simply let himself be killed. He would survive, no matter what it took. And with that same determination, he vowed to save that girl as well, Alexandra, who is also destined for the guillotine. The memory fades, and he finds himself being fitted into an ornate, light-colored noble's outfit. He looks at his reflection with unease, wondering if this is truly all right. His discomfort is lost on the two maids attending to him. They clap their hands in delight, exclaiming that the outfit suits him perfectly and that his highness looks even more wonderful than usual. He internally rejects their praise. The outfit is far too gaudy. In his previous life, he had always worn black, and these bright colors felt unsettling. He decides this will not do and demands they find him clothes that are darker and more suitable. Moments later, dressed in a sharp, dark, double-breasted suit, he appraises his reflection with satisfaction. This was much better. As a nearby clock chimes the hour, he realizes time is running out. An attendant's voice calls out, confirming that his highness is needed. He picks up a finely embroidered handkerchief, his expression softening slightly. Stepping into the hallway, he stops short. A young girl with short, light-colored hair is crying quietly to herself. He approaches her gently, asking if she is all right and telling her not to cry. She looks up at him, her tears replaced by a small, grateful smile as she holds the handkerchief he offered. He watches her, thinking he should have asked her name and hoping she feels better. Just then, a voice urgently calls for Lord Harold. He must go now. With a final glance, he turns to leave. He arrives in a grand room where a kingly figure greets him. Harold bows his head, apologizing for his tardiness. Before him stands a young woman, Alexandra, who offers a formal greeting and a deep curtsy, expressing her honor at the meeting. This is Alexandra of Chevalier, daughter of Duke Chevalier and a prominent figure within the Howls Kingdom. She is known as one of the heroines from the story Engage Hazard. Harold recalls the grim fate that awaits her if her path is not followed. Due to her low popularity among the people, she and her father are destined to be executed for treason. Despite this tragic potential, she had always been his favorite. He remembers a specific, hopeful line she would deliver if her path was chosen, a plea to be seen for who she truly was. It was that single line and her sorrowful expression that had captured his heart. He clenches his fist, steeling his resolve. To survive in this world, he must cast aside the role of the incompetent evil prince. He understands now that her fate and his are intertwined. His intense focus breaks as Alexander questions him, a look of confusion on her face. Harold stammers an apology while the king observes, misinterpreting his tension as being flustered by Alexandra's beauty. Seeing the opportunity, the king suggests they all retire to the courtyard for tea. Moments later, they sit in awkward silence in a garden gazebo. Harold panics internally, realizing that while he must prevent a terrible future, he has absolutely no idea how to start a simple conversation. His frustration mounts, and he grips his knee tightly, thinking how much he despises this helplessness. Alexandra notices his distress, her voice filled with concern as she questions his behavior. He keeps his gaze lowered, finally speaking. He presumes to know her thoughts, acknowledging that he likely doesn't seem like a very good prince to her. He continues, stating that she must also understand that she cannot refuse this engagement. He stands silently for a moment, his mind fixed on a single thought. 3 years. Alexandra, her expression stern, breaks the silence, demanding to know what he is trying to say. In a sudden outburst that startles Alexandra, he declares his intention, pleading for 3 years. He promises that in that time, he will become a man worthy of her. He then drops to his knees, bowing his head to the ground in a gesture of profound sincerity. He vows that if, after those 3 years, he remains an unworthy man, he will personally request that she dissolve their engagement. He remains on the ground, imploring her to wait. He is convinced that this is the only way to avoid a terrible fate. Alexandra simply stands and watches him, her thoughts unreadable. Looking up at the start, he sees her expression soften slightly. She agrees to his terms, but with a condition. She will spend the time determining if his feelings are genuine. As Harold processes her words, a maid named Monica approaches, presenting a sword and shield. Alexandra announces that she will now strike him with her full strength. His only task, she explains, is to defend himself. He stares in disbelief, exclaiming that her demand is unreasonable. Unmoved, Alexandra challenges him, questioning if the resolve he showed just moments ago has already vanished. With a grimace, he accepts the sword and shield. Seeing his compliance, Alexandra offers a small, gentle smile and thanks him. He steels himself, recalling her words. He reasons that while winning might be impossible, he can certainly defend. He resolves to block her attack, no matter what. Across from him, Alexandra readies her own blade and lunges forward. Her attack is a blur of motion, impossibly fast. The strike connects with his shield, not with a clang, but with a deafening crack. The shield shatters into pieces, the force of the blow sending him stumbling backward in utter shock. He looks up from the ground, stunned. Alexandra stands over him, her expression cold and her eyes glowing a faint red. He realizes he has never seen her look this way before. He recalls her words about the test, but the sight of her red eyes leaves him bewildered. Her stern demeanor vanishes in an instant, replaced by a gentle smile. She curtsies gracefully, formally introducing herself as Alexandra Chevalier and stating that she looks forward to his answer in 3 years. Still reeling, Harold can only stammer out his thanks. With their agreement settled, he waves goodbye as her carriage pulls away. Alexandra offers a final, pleasant smile from the window before departing. Watching her leave, a look of renewed determination crosses his face. He clenches his fist, vowing to himself that this is the first step and that in 3 years he will not fail. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Alexandra's composure has completely dissolved. She beams with unrestrained joy, realizing that she has finally done it. She has secured an engagement with the man she has longed for since the day they first met. Her maid, Monica, observes her lady's elation. She confirms that the secret request for an engagement has been successfully carried out, but adds a dry remark that for a successful engagement with Lord Harold, Alexandra seems a bit too relieved. Alexandra waves off the concern, insisting that it's perfectly fine and that Monica simply wouldn't understand her feelings on the matter. Monica's expression remains serious and unconvinced. A sudden, startling thought strikes her. Her face flushes with embarrassment as she covers her mouth, realizing with a jolt that her eyes had turned red during the confrontation. Monica confirms her lady's unspoken fear, stating plainly that during the earlier test of strength, her eyes had indeed become faintly red. Alexandra shrinks in mortification. The maid continues her lecture, questioning what might happen if Lord Harold were to learn the truth behind her red eyes. She warns that the engagement they worked so hard to secure could be jeopardized. Monica chides her for being unable to control her loving expressions when Harold is involved. Flustered and embarrassed, Alexandra protests that Monica is being completely unreasonable. Her frustration was palpable, the sound of a service bell ringing sharply in the room mirroring her agitation. Her maid, Monica, observed that while her mistress's usual disposition was poor, this was the first time she seemed so prepared for a fight, advising her to try and adopt the social graces of a slightly less capable woman. She pouted, lamenting that she was unloved and had a terrible personality. Monica reminded her that she was known for having eyes as cold as ice and was called the villainess of the story, and that she had been told to keep her mouth shut for a reason. Despite the criticism, Alexandra's expression brightened. Her maid was taken aback, stating she never thought Lord Harold would fail to defend against her mistress's attack. Alexandra corrected her with a smile, explaining that the strike had been imbued with her dragon's majesty. She recalled the moment vividly, how Harold had matched the movement of her sword in an instant, using just his fingertips to deflect the blow and disperse its impact. She mused that he likely hadn't even realized what he had done. The memory brought a blush to her cheeks. She held her hands to her chest, thinking that only Lord Harold was worthy of being her partner. He was the one who had saved her that day at that place. Meanwhile, in his own chambers, Harold sat on his bed, contemplating his next move. He knew that in Halbert would inevitably become a battlefield, and in his current state, he would surely perish. He recalled telling Alexandra to wait for 3 years, a smirk playing on his lips. His confidence came from his knowledge of the character Harold's overpowered settings, incredibly high attack and defense against match. His confidence was rooted in the character's inherent stats. While his skills were innate and limited to the light attribute, leaving him weak to physical attacks, he possessed one singular advantage. His skill points, required for activating abilities, were maxed out at 999. With this knowledge, he concluded that his potential was more than sufficient. His next steps were clear. He needed to figure out how to properly train this body and, first, find a weapon. His planning was interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. A maid with long, dark hair and a severe expression entered, announcing herself with cold formality. She was Marion Shearer, and she would be his attendant from that day forward. A young woman in a maid's uniform formally introduces herself. She is Marion Shearer, and starting today, she will be attending to Harold. The young prince is stunned, his eyes wide with shock. He recognizes the name instantly and wonders why the story's heroine is here, thinking to himself that she is supposed to be Wilfred's maid. She bows deeply, politely asking him to call upon her for any needs he may have. Harold, still processing the situation, can only manage a stammered acknowledgement. With a quiet, "Well then," she turns and departs, her footsteps soft as she exits the room. He is left alone, a dark silhouette standing before the now-closed doors. His initial shock gives way to a cunning smirk. He reflects on his reputation as an arrogant and overbearing, incompetent, evil prince, deciding that this unexpected turn of events is actually more convenient for his plans. His thoughts drift to his true objective, to live a quiet life with his fiancée, Alexandra, paying no mind to any of the other heroines. This is his one and only goal. He recalls a crucial detail from the original story's timeline. Marion was supposed to become Wilfred's maid, but only after 3 years had passed. This change is deeply unsettling. The weight of this altered reality crashes down on him. Clutching the collar of his shirt, his face twists in anguish as he silently begs for the torment to stop. This is a past, a suffering that the original Harold never had to face. His mind is thrown back to his childhood, a time of constant, unfavorable comparisons to his talented older brothers. Though he bore the royal crest of the de Howells family, he possessed no other skills. He strove desperately for his parents' approval, but his efforts were always in vain. The memory sharpens to a devastating moment on his birthday. His own mother told him he was nothing but a substitute for his brother, Curtis, and warned him not to drag their family down. Even now, the recollection of her words feels like shattering glass, threatening to break his heart all over again. He sat up in bed, flustered, as his new maid, Marion, stood silently by the door. He stammered, asking for a wash basin. He reflected on the week that had passed since Marion became his maid. He knew she was neglecting her duties, likely because she looked down on him as the infamous, incompetent, evil prince. Later, inside a training hall, wooden dummies stood ready for practice, with swords and shields arranged neatly against the far wall. There, Harold swung a heavy sword with all his might. He had been training every day since his memories returned, but he harbored doubts about whether it would be enough to make him truly strong. He lamented that this world, unlike the game Enhance, had no concept of levels to quantify progress. He paused, contemplating how to max out his abilities. While he could train his physical stats, he was stumped about his magical ones. Since he couldn't use magic, he wondered how he could possibly improve those values. He considered the possibilities, recalling that in Enhance, weapons of R rarity or higher possessed inherent skills. A potential solution formed in his mind. Perhaps he could train his magic by using a weapon that held a magical skill. He reasoned that some of those weapons must exist, and if he could get his hands on one, he might be able to raise his magic-related stats. However, he realized there was something else he needed to address first. His shoulders slumped in resignation before his expression hardened with resolve. His first priority had to be maxing out his pathetically weak physical stats. He reasoned that even a small improvement might prove useful when the time came. As he raised the sword to strike a training dummy, a hand suddenly shot out, stopping the blade's descent with just 2 fingers. Harold stared in disbelief. She held the weapon effortlessly, a bucket of water now balanced perfectly on his head. With a smug smile, Marion informed him that he was doing it all wrong. She looks down on the flustered young man, asking if he is quite finished and offering her assistance. Harold stammers that he was merely imitating someone without talent, his shock evident. His mind races, recalling details from the game Enhance. He remembers Alexandra, known as the weakest character, and Marion, who hails from a family of knights and possessed high physical abilities in the game. A realization dawns on him. If he trains with the heroine, he might be able to grow stronger. He hesitantly asks if she is certain about helping him train. With a confident smile, Marion assures him that she has no objections. As he raises his sword, a palpable pressure emanates from him. Marion acknowledges the impressive force, but as Harold steels himself, convinced he must surpass this to survive, she inwardly dismisses his resolve as insufficient. She sidesteps his lunge with fluid grace, disarming him in a single, swift movement. The sword now in her hand, she looks down at him, declaring him a reckless child and stating it's no wonder others find him a nuisance. He sits defeated against the wall, the sting of her words sharp in his mind. She leans in close, her voice cutting as she asks if he finds it humiliating to be lectured by a mere maid. He grips the hilt of his sword, acknowledging his own weakness. Yet, this is precisely why he cannot give up. He reflects that unlike the character he once knew, this version of Harold has no talent and no skills. He resolves fiercely that he will not stand by and simply watch events unfold. His moment of resolve is interrupted by a new arrival. Another maid, observing the scene, remarks that Marion still seems to have plenty of energy. As Marion is caught off guard, the newcomer tells her she has gone too far, then formally introduces herself as Monica Ashton, the new head maid. The introduction stuns Harold, who realizes this must be Alexandra's maid. Marion, equally shocked, protests that she was never informed of this appointment. Monica calmly suggests that she is free to confirm the appointment with the head of maids. With a knowing smile, She adds that she is certain they will meet again at their next, more splendid workplace, leaving Marion looking deeply unsettled. She declares that when Harold becomes an accomplished master, she will serve as his personal maid. Extending a hand, Monica Ashton formally asks him to accept her service. As Harold, still on the floor, dazedly agrees, Marion Shearer appears in the doorway, demanding they wait for her to confirm the situation. Marion storms forward, shouting and demanding an explanation for what is happening. Monica calmly turns to face her, stating that she has already reported all of Marion's numerous acts of disrespect toward Lord Harold. With cold finality, she informs Marion that her services are no longer required. Fuming, she whirls around and departs, shouting back that they will come to regret this. Harold and Monica simply watch her go. Later, Monica escorts Harold back to his room to treat the injuries from his training. As she tends to him, he reflects that this is the first time a maid has ever treated him with such kindness. His gentle expression hardens as he calls out to her. He questions what she is doing, gesturing to the various items she has efficiently placed around his room. Monica, in turn, thinks to herself that if it is for her master, she should be able to craft at least one useful item from the materials at hand. He asks about moving to another location, but she cuts him off with a sharp glance. She explains that she is merely gathering what is necessary for him and advises him not to concern himself with such trivialities. Accepting her explanation, Harold smiles and says he will be in her care from now on. Monica smiles back, replying that it is her pleasure. Suddenly, a voice from outside the window calls out for Lord Harold. The scene shifts to a dining hall where Harold is eating. An attendant enters, apologizing for the interruption. He introduces himself as being in the service of Lord Cartes and extends an offer for Harold to join his master for dinner that evening. Harold's face contorts with annoyance. He recalls a time before he regained his memories, when he was desperate for his mother's approval and, in his efforts, had sold out Cartes completely. He considers Cartes' motives, suspecting the man must have some use for him. While part of him wants to keep Cartes guessing, he concludes that refusing the invitation would be far too troublesome. He resolves to go, asking an unseen person to accompany him and relay his acceptance. The decision made, his body gives out. He collapses onto the stone floor, utterly spent, having just completed his 1,000th practice swing. As he lies there, he looks up to see Alexandra Chevalier gazing down at him, her expression unreadable. He internally laments that despite his strenuous efforts, he feels no stronger, and the weight of the promise he made to her presses down on him. She kneels beside him, calmly addressing him as Lord Harold and noting his exhaustion. Startled by her sudden proximity and gentle tone, he stammers, questioning why she is there. She explains that a month has passed since they last met. To delay their engagement any further would be improper, so she decided to come to him herself. As he struggles to find words, she simply tells him to be more careful next time. He berates himself internally, calling himself an idiot. He had resolved to become a man worthy of her, yet his inaction has forced Alexandra, the very person he wishes to impress, to come to him. He feels that if he cannot approach her on his own, his efforts are meaningless. Scrambling to his feet, he points out that her family's territory is a great distance from the capital. She confirms this, calmly explaining that she has already moved into a townhouse in the capital city for the sake of their engagement. He is stunned by this revelation. She continues, stating that she would have come to the palace anytime if he had just called for her. Her expression then softens with curiosity as a new thought occurs to her. Perhaps his coming all this way means he holds some small interest in her after all. The suggestion sends him into a silent panic. He vehemently denies it in his mind, reminding himself that this is only the second time they have ever met. Her question about why he was practicing with his sword only adds to his fluster. Searching for an excuse, he stammers that he was merely practicing because the weather happened to be pleasant. It was a complete coincidence, he insists, nothing more. He clenches his fist, knowing the reason for his roundabout behavior. Alexandra observes him, stating that he's training so she will acknowledge him, and questions why he can't just be more direct. His mind drifts back to a time when he felt utterly alone, convinced that he had no talent and that no one would ever acknowledge his efforts. His reverie is broken when Alexandra mentions a period of 1 month, leaving him momentarily confused. She clarifies, reminding him of the promise he made to her a month prior. A memory surfaces of them as children, where she had encouraged him to try his best. He looks down, confessing his deep-seated insecurity. He explains that because he lacks talent, he feels he must work twice as hard as anyone else to be worthy of standing by her side as her fiancée in 3 years' time. Flustered, he asks if she would be willing to help him train. He quickly adds that this is something he must do to earn her approval. Alexandra's expression remains neutral as she asks if he considers her bother. He reacts instantly, grabbing her by the shoulders and vehemently denying her suggestion. Recoiling in embarrassment, he stammers that he is only training for his own sake and apologizes for wasting her time. Alexandra's expression softens into a gentle smile as she reassures him, reminding him that she is, after all, his fiancée. Her words wash over him, and a deep blush spreads across his face as he quietly thanks her. The tender moment is broken when Alexandra suggests they have a match immediately. He stares in disbelief, questioning if she is serious. She draws a sword, her smile unwavering. She tells him not to be concerned, reminding him that she successfully defended against his previous attack and now expects him to show her a strength that surpasses even her high expectations. She looks down at the flustered herald with a confident smile, telling him to be prepared. After her declaration, she turns to leave, bidding him farewell until the next day. Harold, now holding a practice sword alongside his maid Marion, watches her go with a look of utter confusion. As she walks away, her expression turns serious. She reminds herself that tomorrow is another day, but there are only 3 years left, and not a single one can be wasted. The weight of her words crashes down on him. He panics, realizing it's not just 3 years, but a mere 3 years. He knows that if he fails to become strong within this time frame, the future of ruin from the story awaits him. Later, inside, Marion leans close to Harold, declaring that she will personally see to it that he's exhausted by mourning. Monica acknowledges the order. Alexandra, overhearing, protests that Marion is going too far, but Marion dismisses her, stating that Alexandra wasn't invited to the evening dinner with Lord Quirce. While she was. She asserts that as his fiancée, it's no problem for her to attend the dinner. In the background, Alexandra seethes with frustration. In response, Alexandra whirls around and points a finger at a startled Harold, strictly forbidding him from telling her anything about the dinner the next day. Before he can process this, Marion begins pulling him away, urging him to get ready quickly. He reluctantly agrees as she excuses them and leads him through a doorway. Having changed into formal attire, he arrives flustered, apologizing for his tardiness. A man with clasped hands calmly states that he's been waiting. The man is revealed to be Quirce de Howells, the first prince of the de Howells kingdom. Harold stares, his expression a mixture of shock and apprehension. Harold stood in stunned silence. He had been bullied by Wilfred for being the incompetent evil prince, yet here his brother was, supposedly offering congratulations on his engagement. The disbelief was plain on his face as he wondered if this could possibly be genuine. He watched as Wilfred confirmed with a smile that he was, of course, serious, and offered his congratulations once more. The words were impossible for Harold to accept, and a sliver of hope for a potential reconciliation flickered within him. His thoughts were cut short as his gaze fell upon the maids accompanying his brother. He was shocked to see Marion among them, realizing she had become Wilfred's maid. Suddenly, her previous fury made perfect sense. He processed this new information, noting the stark difference in their attitudes. While Wilfred was the fallen prince, Harold was the incompetent evil prince, a far more despised position. He couldn't understand why the heroine would be drawn to Wilfred under these circumstances. Wilfred then added that he needed to thank his brother. He elaborated that because Harold had gotten engaged, Wilfred was able to dismiss his own fiancée, which in turn allowed him to hire Marion as his personal maid. He expressed his sincere gratitude for this outcome. A blushing Marion thanked him in return, stating that now she could truly serve her master. Watching them depart together, Harold understood. The path of joining forces with the story's protagonist was now firmly closed to him. Sometime later, his training began. Alexandra sat before him, remarking on the poor attitudes of both a fallen prince and a maid from a ruined house. She insisted that to ensure their engagement succeeded, he needed to get stronger, and quickly. In the background, an exhausted Harold collapsed. He lay on the ground, wishing this world were a game where he could simply grind for power. Alexandra advised that for efficiency, he should first observe her using her preferred weapon. Kneeling with a sword, Harold considered his options. The original Harold's weapon was a spear, but his own would be different. She watched him, then ventured a guess. A shield. It was a weapon he had spent the last month carefully considering and selecting. He recalled his reasoning. In the game, Harold was a character with low defense who relied on magic. A shield would compensate for that weakness. But above all, the most important reason he chose it was because Alexandra, his beloved, had praised him for the idea. She smiles, calling his choice of shield wonderful. With a confident look, she tells him that if he masters it, he will surely be known as an iron wall. She takes his hands in hers, her expression earnest and dazzling. With unwavering conviction, she promises that she will be the one to make him strong. With that promise, their training begins. Sometime later, Alexandra, now holding a shield herself, calls for a break. Harold, however, is still buzzing with excitement, insisting they should start the shield training immediately. 3 months pass. Harold lies exhausted on the ground, panting out his thanks. Alexandra looks down at him, noting that he has improved considerably and that at this rate, ordinary people will no longer be able to injure him. His improvement came at a cost. The daily training was hellish, a relentless cycle of trials. Despite this, he realizes with frustration that he still cannot block even 20% of her attacks. Sensing his doubt, she tells him to have confidence. She explains that even if it's only 20%, there is no one in the Chevalier Ducal house, aside from Monica, who can block her sword at all. He processes her words, a new worry dawning on him. He wonders aloud if it's truly all right to focus only on this special training, concerned that his academic studies are being neglected. Alexandra quickly reassures him not to worry about it. He turns to her with a serious expression, telling her not to underestimate a former university student. Taken aback for a moment, she concedes that if he says so, then it must be fine. The grueling session concludes in the training hall. Alexandra announces that they are done for the day and bids him well until tomorrow. Slumped on the floor, Harold can only manage a weak affirmation muttering about his exhaustion. As she turns to leave, she announces she is going to change. She glances back, wondering aloud what would happen if he didn't have a chest plate. From the floor, Harold's eyes widen in sudden, stark realization. He lets out a startled cry as Marion Shearer whispers into his ear, her hand covering her mouth. Stuttering in disbelief, he looks at her with wide, panicked eyes, asking if they are truly taking his measurements that very night. As she calmly pours a cup of tea, Marion addresses him as Your Highness and politely excuses herself. With a knowing smile, she adds that it's all right, as she didn't see a thing. The comment only flusters him further. He knows that's exactly what someone who saw everything would say. At a table with Alexandra and his maids, Harold de Howells clasps his hands, a determined look on his face. He asks if they know of a shield that would suit him, before answering his own question. He declares that the one he desires, the one truly worthy of him, is the jet-black Casper. Alexandra immediately cautions him. She explains that the jet-black Caspering is a creature from Moon Island, and that no one has ever succeeded in obtaining it, even with 1,000 soldiers. She warns him that with his current strength, such an attempt would be fatal, and pleads with him to reconsider. He remains resolute, insisting that the jet-black Caspering is the only shield he can imagine using. He elaborates that it is the rarest and most powerful dark elemental shield available to him. To acquire it, one must subjugate the boss known as Chaos Hallie. He details its unique skill, the Claw of Darkness, which enables long-range attacks, carries an instant death effect, and ensures a high drop rate for powerful items. Her expression softens with worry. Alexandra tells him that they must cooperate to avoid certain defeat, but admits that asking him to undertake such a reckless task is agonizing for her. She confesses that she is simply worried about him. Harold looks down, troubled by her genuine concern. A tense silence hangs between them. Her gaze, a mixture of frustration and concern, is a reflection of unease. Finally, she sighs in resignation. Alexandra agrees to his plan, but makes him promise one thing. He must not act recklessly and must follow her instructions during the battle. Visibly relieved, Harold quickly agrees to her terms. Having reached an accord, the group travels. Harold, Alexandra, and Marion arrive on a sun-drenched island dotted with palm trees. Shielding his eyes, Harold looks around and confirms their location, Moon Island. As they prepare to venture further, a small, jet-black cat with bristling fur and glowing red eyes emerges from the foliage. It snarls, declaring that this is its territory and threatening to kill them if they dare take another step. The creature's appearance catches them off guard. Harold recognizes it as the Caspering, but notes that it seems smaller than he'd imagined. Alexandra expresses her own surprise, having expected a large lion. Marion concurs, remarking that a creature this cute shouldn't exist here. Their comments infuriate the small feline. It puffs out its chest and flexes its claws, angrily shouting that it is strong and that they should be terrified. The small creature lunged, claws extended, scratching at Harold's face. Stunned, Harold held it at arm's length, questioning if this tiny, furious beast could truly be the legendary Casper. Its attack ceased as it landed gracefully, crossing its arms with a smug look. The creature spoke, its voice filled with pride, commending Harold for seeing past its unassuming form. It scoffed at the idea that it would be a mere giant lion, boasting that Casperings are far stronger than their size suggests. It then posed a question, asking if they were familiar with the name Jet Black Casper. It dangled a piece of information as bait, promising to share it if they would only listen to its words. The offer, however, was laced with a clear threat. Any insolence would result in them being torn to pieces. Harold's response was immediate and blunt, a firm refusal. The Caspering recoiled in surprise. He clarified his position. While the shield the creature could become was indeed desirable, he had no interest in its demands. His rejection left the creature crestfallen. It sat alone, contemplating its predicament. Despite its power, it was a dangerous being forced to seek aid from humans, a clear sign that it faced an enemy it could not overcome on its own. Meanwhile, Alexandra conferred with Marion, her expression resolute. She declared that her own life and the things she held dear were her priority. She had no time to spare for the problems of a magical beast. Marion, however, proposed they at least identify the insolent one the creature spoke of. Alexandra conceded the point. Overhearing them, Harold interjected that if the foe was beyond their capabilities, they should simply retreat, a plan the Caspering readily accepted. With their reluctant agreement secured, the creature pointed towards a clearing. It began to describe their target, a being with a body as beautiful as snow, but marred by a grotesque contradiction. Its eyes were sewn shut, and its form was that of a bloated, foul sow. Following its directions, they came upon the creature itself. A monstrous, pale beast with stitched features, the raid boss Hen 1, identified as the final form of a holy beast. With a cry of vengeance for its mother, the small black cat launched itself into battle. The sudden attack left the three humans watching from the sidelines. Harold turned to the others, weighing their options. He reasoned that abandoning the Caspering now would reset their plan, but a new thought surfaced. There was another secret strategy, one for which the shield was no longer necessary. He made his choice. Stepping between the massive beast and the small feline, Harold raised the shield. The Caspering watched, realizing that it, too, had once given up on itself, just like Harold. It had gotten involved with something far more powerful than it could handle, but for that very reason, it had to see this through. Harold, meanwhile, faced the towering Henwin directly, roaring at the beast to get its filthy feet away from them, calling it a pig bastard. In the heat of battle, Harold the Howls plants his shield firmly, bracing against the immense bulk of the raid boss, Henwin. Behind the monstrous creature, Alexandra Chevalier and Marion Shearer engage in the chaotic fray. Amidst the danger, Alexandra remains strangely composed, a faint smile playing on her lips. She internally acknowledges that the situation seems hopeless, yet she calmly considers what to do, viewing this dire moment as a rare opportunity. Her attention is drawn back to Harold, who now sports a wide, manic grin. He enthusiastically suggests they take down the beast together, a sentiment echoed by the jet-black Caspering, who chimes in with a determined cry. He then roars for them to advance, declaring that it is their turn to face Henwin. With his shield raised high, he charges forward into the fray. The charge is met with overwhelming force as Henwin pushes back, its raw power too much for Harold to handle. Alexandra observes his struggle, noting that he is being overpowered. Harold grits his teeth, realizing he cannot maintain his defense. With a deafening crash, Henwin's blow shatters his guard, sending him hurtling backward through the air. Marion cries out his name in alarm as he tumbles away from the beast. He lands hard on the stone floor. Alexander calls out to him, but his attention is fixed elsewhere. Realizing he must forge his own path, he turns to the small feline creature and addresses it by its full title, Jet Black Casper. He reaches out a hand, gently touching the pendant on the Caspering's collar. He formally introduces himself, "I am Harold," and then asks, "Are you the Jet Black Caspering?" The Caspering affirms its identity, its eyes glowing with an intense red light. A surge of power erupts from the creature, crackling like lightning and throwing Harold backward onto the ground with a startled cry. As he recovers, a translucent screen materializes before him. The Caspering explains that it is a status display, unique to Harold. The screen lists his name, level, and attributes. Staring at his own glowing hand, Harold wonders what this new power could be. He stared at the interface before him, bewildered. He was Harold now, so how could he use a unique skill? Alexander stepped forward, explaining that mana is the source of all power for those who live in this world. She reasoned that there must be a purpose for his abilities, and that he must use his unique skill to survive. As he looked upon the glowing magic circle, a realization struck him. This world was structured exactly like the game he knew. With this new understanding, his attention turned to the Caspering perched on his shoulder. The creature asked if he could truly steal mana from others. A confident smirk spread across Harold's face as he confirmed it. The Caspering seemed taken aback, questioning if he would really take such a large amount of mana from her and sever her connection. Harold's expression hardened as he retorted, asking why he should care about the one who tried to kill him. He declared that he would take her mana without a second thought. His ruthless decision shocked the Caspering. Flustered, Harold shouted back that he didn't know what else he was supposed to do. At that moment, Marion appeared, her expression grim. The scene shifted to reveal Alexandra, now mounted atop the massive Henwin, brandishing a glowing sword and calling out for someone named Monica. Once again, Harold finds himself facing the monstrous Henwin. He mutters in frustration, questioning the recurring threat. Beside him, Alexandra's expression hardens as she vows not to let the beast take anything precious from her. He turns to both Alexandra and Marion, his voice firm with resolve. He declares that they are both important to him and orders them to stay behind him, promising to protect them. As he speaks, he feels a surge of power. Caspering, perched on his shoulder, confirms the activation of a skill, Jet Black Caspering, which has boosted his attack power to an incredible 9994. His defense is now twice as effective. Harold realizes that with this strength, he can withstand even an SSR-class attack. His newfound confidence is immediately tested as Henwin begins to move. Alexander shouts a warning about the creature's motion just as the beast lunges forward with terrifying speed. The monster unleashes a devastating breath attack, a torrent of energy blasting towards the group. Alexandra cries out Harold's name in alarm. He watches in horror as the explosion engulfs the spot where his companion stood. A cry of pure shock and disbelief escapes his lips as he screams out for the two of them. As the smoke clears, Harold stares at the empty space, devastated. He laments his failure, believing he was supposed to have protected them. His despair is interrupted by Alexandra's voice. She reveals she used a precious item called a bivia as a decoy, smearing it with her blood to draw the attack. Holding up the small, bloodied object, she urges him to look closely at the beast. Following her words, Henwin's massive body begins to convulse violently. A dark, ominous energy starts to pour from its stitched-shut mouth. As Harold watches, bewildered, Caspering appears and provides an explanation. The bivia, it reveals, is an item that belonged to Harold's mother. The creature lets out a final, guttural noise as the dark energy swirls and intensifies. As the monstrous form of Henwin dissolves into a pool of black ichor, the immediate threat is finally neutralized. Harold the Howls, standing with Alexandra and Marion, looks on with a sense of grim finality. He reaches down, placing a reassuring hand on the head of the small, cat-like creature, Casper. He quietly confirms his success to the creature, who seems to nod in understanding. Harold then questions it, asking why it returned and what it is. His thoughts race, connecting Casperin's appearance with the fact that his mother could no longer maintain their contract and the sudden emergence of Henwin. He realizes this must signify a truly dire situation. Casperin seems to confirm his fears, explaining that his mother is no longer in its world. A spark of understanding ignites in Harold's eyes. If they are together, they can both grow stronger. With newfound resolve, he extends his hand and proposes they become partners. Casperin agrees, and as their fingers touch, a new pact is sealed. Princess Alexandra, her eyes wide with excitement, asks if the plan has begun. Beside her, Marion Shearer maintains a stoic expression, confirming that it has. Flustered, Alexandra protests that she wasn't mentally prepared and insists Marion should have refused the arrangement. Marion calmly explains that since the request came from the Chevalier family itself, refusal was not an option. She reminds the princess that Henwin was a monster that terrorized the royal capital, framing this as a valuable opportunity. As Alexandra trembles with apprehension, Marion reassures her that they will face this together. Still flustered, Alexandra questions why she must be the one involved. As Marion averts her gaze, a look of realization dawns on the princess's face. Her expression softens into a gentle smile as she understands that Marion is doing all of this for her sake. Her thoughts drift to the past. The Chevalier family is one of the 6 great houses supporting the kingdom, and they have long sought a connection to the royal family. This desire manifested when Harold the Howls once proposed to her, a memory of him offering a single rose surfacing in her mind. She recalls that the head of the Chevalier house is not her father, but her grandfather. It was he who accepted the proposal, though she remains unaware of the specific details. Alexandra muses that Harold must have had his own reasons for the proposal, her mind flashing to an image of him speaking with a blonde kitchen maid. With renewed determination, Alexandra declares this to be a perfect opportunity to uncover his true intentions. She asserts that she cannot allow a manipulative setup like the Henwin incident to occur again. Therefore, she will use this chance to get close to Harold and learn the truth. Marion smiles, pledging her full support. Alexandra gratefully accepts her help, both united in their goal. For the sake of their future, they will move forward together, aiming to stand beside Harold and unravel the mysteries surrounding him. Later, in Harold's chambers, Marion serves a meal. Casperin eats with gusto, and Marion notes how much the creature is enjoying the food. Harold, holding a piece of meat on a fork, casually offers it to Marion, suggesting she try it. From the doorway, Alexandra watches, her face flushing with shock and disbelief at the intimate gesture. She clears her throat, flustered, and politely declines the offer. Harold simply looks on, puzzled by her reaction. The focus then shifts to the blonde kitchen staff member, Marilyn, who appears to be in the middle of a serious conversation. Marilyn confesses that she was the one who pushed Harold into proposing. With tears in her eyes, she reveals that even though she is engaged to Quirce, she wanted to be with Harold. Harold stands before her, his expression one of utter shock at the revelation. He stood before a young woman with light hair, contemplating their new arrangement. He acknowledged that they would now be living together in the royal capital, seeing it as a chance for them to become better acquainted. The woman, Frederica, immediately cut to the heart of the matter, asking what his plans were for someone named Sandra. She raised a finger, her expression serious, explaining that she needed to confirm his intentions. The implication of her question began to dawn on him. Harold stammers, his face flushed, as Alexandra's voice invites him to the event, offering to be his escort. He is utterly flustered by the proposition, unable to form a coherent response. She appears before him, already dressed in a stunning gown, and tells him she's been waiting. Now in his own formal, dark attire, Harold collects himself, deciding that he is ready for this. He still looks nervous, however, as he addresses her as Haim-sama. She stands radiantly, the gown shimmering around her. Harold is completely captivated, his mind reeling. He can only think of how cute she looks, a thought that leaves him blushing and bewildered. Later, inside a carriage, Alexandra offers him a sandwich. Harold is taken aback by the casual gesture, questioning if it's a side dish. She confirms that it is. She explains that she thought he might be hungry. Her hand then drifts to the choker around her neck, which she reveals is a magic item that changes color. He asks if she is worried, but she simply smiles and thanks him for the beautiful hair ornament he gave her, adding that Monica helped her put on. With a sincere expression, she tells him that if he is willing to accept her, then she will accept him in return. She continues, clarifying that even if their partnership is just for appearances, she is happy he came with her. Harold listens, his expression softening. Alexandra then extends her gloved hand towards him, inviting him to take it. Upon their arrival at a grand hall filled with guests, Alexandra remarks on the unexpectedly large number of nobles present. Their conversation is cut short by the arrival of Wilfred, who appears with Marion Shearer at his side, both looking down upon them. The blonde noble scoffs at Harold's presence. Unfazed, Harold tells him to simply say what he means. As they stand off, the flash of camera captures Wilfred and Marion posing together with an air of superiority. After the photograph, Marion approaches Harold directly. She remarks that Alexandra is quite beautiful, but not to her personal taste. Harold curtly thanks her for the unsolicited opinion. Marian then adds that she is looking forward to Alexandra's performance, leaving him to ponder her cryptic words. At a grand social gathering, Marian Shearer formally thanks Harold and Alexandra for their attendance. Harold offers a polite reply. Beside him, Alexandra observes his uncharacteristically serious expression, musing that it must be due to the impending meeting. A faint, knowing smile plays on her lips. As Marian prepares to lead them on, they're interrupted by Wilfred, who approaches with a companion. He greets Harold with a smirk, remarking on how much he seems to be enjoying himself with Alexandra. The comment fills Harold with a sudden sense of foreboding. He leans in close, his voice low, asking if Harold has forgotten their talk, that he is supposed to be his rival. Harold is momentarily stunned, realizing Wilfred is referring to their supposed competition for Alexandra's affection. His rival continues, pointing out that Harold's closeness to Alexandra makes it impossible for him to make his own move. Their conversation is cut short by an older, mustached noble who approaches, asking Harold about the whereabouts of his brother, Quirce. The mustached noble then turns his attention to Wilfred, questioning if he will allow himself to be outmaneuvered by a mere shadow warrior, a stand-in for the true heir. With a confident smirk, Wilfred declares that he will be the one to defeat Harold. He steps uncomfortably close to Harold, warning him that as a member of the main family, he should be prepared for what is to come. When Harold asks for clarification, Wilfred simply tells him to watch and learn. The mustached noble laughs heartily, pleased with the outcome. He promises Wilfred that if he can defeat Harold, he will be accepted into their faction. Watching from the side, Alexandra silently judges Wilfred as a simpleton, easily played. As the others depart, Harold reflects that Wilfred isn't a bad person, just easily swayed. His thoughts are interrupted by Alexandra, who notes his troubled expression and says she has something important to tell him. Her demeanor shifts, her face hardening with a painful memory. She reveals the shocking truth. She was the one who was supposed to be killed by his hand. The thought fills her with a visible surge of anger and sorrow. She explains that this very day was the fated day of her death. With her hands clasped earnestly, she looks at Harold, her eyes pleading, and asks if he would be willing to speak with her for just a little while longer. A memory surfaces of Princess Alexandra as a child. Since birth, her body had been frail, confining her to her bed. Despite this, she found solace in stories, dreaming of the heroes who saved the world in her books. In that past, a young nobleman spoke to her with a heavy heart, explaining that since he had been chosen as the crown prince, they could no longer be together. A young Alexandra, blushing, quietly accepted his words, saying she understood. The scene shifts to the present, where a young woman named Liliana is being attended to by Marian Shearer. Marian asks if she is ready, reminding her that the crown prince is waiting. Liliana affirms that she has prepared herself, but then seems uncertain, wondering where she is supposed to go. She finds herself before Harold and Alexandra. Shocked, Liliana confronts Harold, questioning why he is with the princess when he was supposed to meet her. With a loud voice, she declares that she is the fiancée chosen for him by his father, the king, and demands an explanation. The confrontation fades as a different memory takes hold. A younger Liliana stands frozen in a vast, empty hall, her anxiety preventing her from moving. Suddenly, a young boy with light-colored hair appears before her, startling her. He asks what is wrong and offers his help, confidently stating that it will be all right since he is a boy. Liliana, still seated on the floor, looks up at him, surprised by his sudden appearance and offer. She asks for his name. With a confident smirk, the boy introduces himself, Harold de Howells, the second prince of the kingdom. The revelation leaves Liliana utterly stunned. He continues, explaining that his father, the king, is always preoccupied with state affairs, and his older brother is constantly by the king's side. The young prince laments that because of this, no one ever seems to notice him. He then turns and tells her to follow him, asking if she has somewhere she needs to be. As he walks away, a smiling Liliana agrees to go with him. The memory concludes, and back in the present, Liliana points assertively towards a door, apologizing for her interruption. In the foreground, Marian's face is a mask of pure shock at the girl's bold action. Trapped in darkness, Liliana's eyes widen with fear. Tears well up as she calls out, questioning if this is some kind of prank. Her voice trembles as she begs for the door to be opened, a desperate plea echoing in the confined space. Her pleas go unanswered, and the horrifying realization that she has been locked in washes over her. Overwhelmed by terror, she breaks down, crying out for the prince as she collapses against the unmoving door. Spotting a sliver of light, she scrambles towards a window, a brief flicker of hope in her eyes. She reaches out, calling for help, but then her hand drops. A heavy silence falls as she realizes the futility of her efforts. As she resigns herself to the grim thought that she might die here, a voice cuts through the silence, asking if anyone is inside. It is Harold. He asks if she is all right and instructs her to move away from the door, startling her from her despair. He appears on the other side of a small, barred window in the door, his expression etched with concern. Liliana looks up, her fear momentarily replaced by relief at the sight of his face. The door bursts open, and Harold catches Liliana as she stumbles out. He holds her, admitting he was scared, and gently pats her head in a comforting gesture. Now safe, she quietly thanks him. As he looks up, his eyes fixate on a small, checkered pouch in her hands. A flicker of recognition crosses his face. It is the same pouch from before. His demeanor shifts. Harold calmly confesses that he was the one who locked her in. He explains it was a necessary measure to protect her and, more importantly, to lure out the person who wishes to harm him. He then poses a question to her, his expression twisting into a wide, unsettling grin. Pointing a finger at himself, he declares that the person who wants to harm Harold is, in fact, her. With a triumphant shout, Harold slams his hand onto the stone floor, the impact cracking the ground beneath it. Liliana can only stare, frozen in shock and terror at the sudden, horrifying accusation. A sudden, sharp pain strikes Liliana, causing her to cry out and wonder what is happening. At the same moment, Harold gasps, clutching his own chest in agony, much to Liliana's shock. Rushing into the hall, Alexandra calls out her own name, asking if she is all right. Seeing Harold near the girl, she shouts at him to get away from Liliana immediately. He clutches his chest, assuring Alexandra that they are both fine. He urges her to go on ahead, explaining that he needs to take care of something. Ignoring his words, Alexandra firmly grabs Liliana's arm, pulling the younger girl away. Liliana protests, telling Alexandra to let go and insisting she is fine. As she is led away, Alexandra glances back at Harold, who now stands alone in the corridor, still in discomfort. Liliana's expression softens with concern for him. Later, in a private moment, Alexandra explains to Harold that she has come to understand why he was protecting Liliana. She states it wasn't due to any special affection, but because he saw a reflection of his past self in the girl. He listens, stunned, as she continues. She elaborates that he saw someone weak and helpless, just as he once was. Because of that shared experience, she says she herself was saved. She takes his hand, her gaze earnest. She tells him that she is no longer a useless princess, and it is all because he was there for her. He looks at her, his expression softening as she declares that she was saved and that she is irreplaceable to him. Her face breaks into a radiant, tearful smile. She confesses that becoming his fiancé has made her truly happy. Harold appears flustered by the raw emotion of her declaration. Overwhelmed by her own words, Alexandra closes the distance and embraces a surprised Harold, holding him tightly. She is his fiancé, and she is happy. Harold howls, flustered, asks if this is what she had in mind. Across from him, Alexandra Chevalier simply smiles, a soft chuckle escaping her lips. Her playful demeanor vanishes, replaced by a cold, calculating intensity. She formally introduces herself as Wilfred Chevalier de Howells, declaring that she has decided to use Harold. With a piercing gaze, she informs him that he is now her prey. He recoils, stunned by her declaration. She explains that the second prince, Quirce, is not to be underestimated and that she requires Harold's power to defeat him. When he questions why he should cooperate, she dismisses his hesitation, stating that he has no other choice. Her expression softens once more as she gently touches his cheek, asking him to consider her proposal. He seems lost in thought, his initial shock giving way to contemplation. She then takes his hand, inviting him to dance. She leads him onto the ballroom floor, thanking him as they take their position. Amidst the other dancing couples, they begin to move together. After the dance concludes, she remarks that it's a shame they must part so soon. Harold, sweating and flustered, realizes he has been completely outmaneuvered. Her tone then shifts to one of deadly seriousness as she asks if he intends to report their conversation to the king. His eyes widen in alarm. She leans in close, whispering that if he does, she will have to silence him. He quickly insists that he had no such intention, his mind racing as he tries to comprehend the kind of woman he is dealing with. His gaze drifts across the room, where he spots Liliana Valletta and Wilfred conversing. He notes that while it's his first time seeing them together, they appear to be getting along quite well. Just then, Liliana's voice cuts through the crowd, calling out his name. Startled, he turns, but Alexandra steps between them, raising a finger to her lips. She chides him for his strange expression and apologizes, admitting that she was only teasing him a little. She beams at him, her cheeks flushed, and says she looks forward to their next meeting. With a coy smile, she asks if her words made him flustered, leaving him utterly speechless. She tugs Harold by the arm, pulling him away from the crowd. He lets out a startled cry as she leads him on. Nearby, Wilfred watches with a smug grin, asking if Harold is already planning to leave. Ignoring him, Alexandra turns back to Harold with a bright smile, telling him not to look so downcast and suggesting they go home together. The suddenness of it all leaves Harold stunned, her name echoing in his thoughts. Harold's mind reels, fixated on his admiration for the world's most endearing character. His thoughts are abruptly interrupted by a smiling, light-haired young man, whose sudden appearance leaves Harold questioning his identity. The stranger's attention, however, is not on Harold. He turns to Alexandra with a familiar greeting, addressing her as his sister. The revelation sends a jolt through Harold, who can only stare in disbelief. He then formally introduces himself as Cedric, Alexandra's older brother, and extends a hand to Harold, acknowledging him as his sister's fiancé. As their hands clasp, Cedric's charming smile twists into something more sinister. He applies a crushing force to the handshake, causing Harold to wince in agony. Releasing his grip, he casually asks Harold what brings him to the event. He explains that he is also present due to an invitation from Prince Quirce, admitting that he had not originally intended to come. He then pulls Alexandra closer, declaring that his true reason for attending was to see her, especially since she was with Harold. The gesture triggers a crucial memory for Harold. He recognizes this man, Cedric, the obsessive older brother from the original story, notorious for sabotaging Alexandra's relationships and reputation out of a twisted sense of affection. Understanding the threat Cedric poses, Harold acts swiftly. He steps between the siblings, insisting to Alexandra that they must leave and calling for Cedric to wait as he guides her away. The sudden intervention leaves Cedric momentarily stunned. His surprise quickly turns to anger. He demands to know why he is being denied this reunion after so long. Alexandra, however, coldly dismisses him, stating that she has no business to discuss with him. Unwilling to be dismissed, he desperately reminds her of his status as the future head of the Chevalier family, asking if there is anything she needs from him. Harold remains firmly positioned between them, a silent guardian. Her gaze shifts to Harold as she makes her wish clear, for her brother to leave them at once. She begins to explain the implications of her engagement to the third prince, but Cedric cuts her off, his composure breaking. He shouts that their union will inevitably have an impact on the ongoing war of succession for the throne. He explains that to maneuver effectively within the royal court, he requires the backing of the Chevalier house. Everything he does, he claims, is for the sake of the next head of the family, himself. Harold listens intently, a thoughtful expression on his face as he absorbs the political calculus. Harold is taken aback, questioning why Cedric would reveal this now and wondering aloud if his own older brothers were involved. With a confident smirk, Cedric confirms Harold's suspicion. He explains that with the royal family and the Chevalier house set to become relatives, he was encouraged to add a little excitement to the proceedings. He then declares with a laugh that while he has no personal interest in the war of succession, he would gladly get involved if it were a request from his dear sister. Beside Harold, Alexandra looks on with a worried expression, while Harold's own face hardens. Alexandra, finding her voice, interrupts, stating that she has heard enough. She turns to Harold, her concern evident as she asks if he is okay. Harold, however, is lost in his own calculations. He believes that to survive in this world, the world of Inhaza, he must borrow the power of the Chevalier house. The most prudent strategy, he concludes, is to bring Cedric to his side. Acting on this realization, he bows his head slightly. He formally states his desire to borrow Sir Cedric's power, a declaration that catches Alexandra by surprise. He reflects internally on his decision. If simply bowing his head can secure the backing of the Chevalier house and help him and Alexandra avoid a terrible fate, then it is a trivial cost. The prideful person he once was, he muses, has vanished. In response to the request, Cedric agrees to lend his power. He immediately adds, however, that there is one condition. Harold looks up, startled by the stipulation, and questions what it could be. He begins by asking for forgiveness for his impertinence, then states that Prince Harold is known throughout the world as the silent, wicked prince, a man with the worst possible reputation. Alexandra reacts with fury, but Harold remains calm, realizing this is a test to see if he is truly worthy of marrying his treasured sister. The pieces click into place for Harold. He recognizes this confrontation for what it is, the duel with Cedric, a key event from the world of Inhaza. Cedric points forward, declaring that if Harold can defeat him in battle, he will finally acknowledge his engagement to Alexandra. He stood there, a bead of sweat on his temple as he processed the challenge. His mind raced, recognizing Cedric as a formidable event boss, one whose abilities were far beyond his own, which paled in comparison even to the heroines of the story. A wave of doubt washed over him as he questioned if, in his current state, he stood any chance of winning. As his thoughts spiraled, a voice called out his name. Alexandra Chevalier stands firm, declaring that she has no need for a partner like her brother. She insists that if the Chevalier family requires support, she will be the one to provide it all. Her defiant statement is cut short by the arrival of her brother, Cedric, who smugly announces that he is the next head of the family. With his face obscured by his hair, Harold quietly concedes, saying he understands, as Alexandra looks on in shock. He steps forward, challenging Harold directly. Cedric questions if Harold intends to prove he is a man worthy of Alexandra. As she calls out Harold's name in concern, Cedric smirks and demands that Harold cross swords with him to demonstrate his worth. Continuing his challenge, Cedric acknowledges that Harold will need time to prepare. He proposes a duel to take place in 1 month at the Chevalier family's townhouse. With a slight, formal bow, he places a hand over his chest and states that he will be looking forward to their confrontation. Alexandra, aghast, calls out to both her brother and Harold, but the challenge has been set. As Cedric departs, Alexandra turns to Harold with a somber expression. She tells him plainly that in his current state, it is almost impossible for him to achieve victory against her brother. His gaze hardens. Harold questions why she would accept her brother's taunts, stating firmly that there was no way he could simply abandon her to that. Alexandra appears flustered by his direct and protective words. Within his mind, Harold's resolve solidifies. He knows he cannot back down. To avoid the prophesied bad ending, he must become the protagonist and marry Alexandra. He pictures a future beyond that terrible fate, one where they have broken through the worst of it and can finally laugh together freely. As they walk away, Alexandra watches Harold's back, thinking to herself that he is truly a fool. From ahead, Harold replies without turning, simply stating, "I know." In the training grounds, Harold lies flat on his back, utterly spent. He manages a faint word of thanks as Caspering sits perched on his chest, tail twitching. Watching from the sidelines, Alexandra turns to Marion with a worried expression, asking for her assessment. Marion, equally concerned, prompts her to be more specific. She clarifies her concern, stating that at his current pace, she doesn't believe Harold can grow any stronger. Marion somberly agrees. From the ground, Harold hears their mercilessly honest evaluation. He processes their words, realizing it means his physical abilities have reached their limit. In response, Alexandra suggests a change in strategy. From this point forward, he should specialize in technical training. As a butterfly flutters by, Caspering watches it thoughtfully. The cat understands that with this realization, they can finally proceed to the next stage. Getting to his feet with a renewed sense of purpose, Harold addresses the two women. He announces that he has a proposal for his future training, or more accurately, a request. He looks directly at Alexandra, asking if she will be his partner for his upcoming sparring sessions. She looks back, a hint of surprise on her face. His attention then shifts to his other companion. He calls out to Caspering, asking if the feline will accompany him for his special training. The cat responds with immediate enthusiasm, leaping onto his shoulder and affectionately rubbing against his cheek. Caspering declares that of course he will join, as he is Harold's partner. Across the training yard, Alexandra gives her own answer. She agrees, acknowledging that it's a good opportunity for her to get accustomed to handling a shield. She appeared flustered by the arrangement, but Harold, still in his night clothes, confidently reassured her. He promised to make her stronger, leaving her to stammer in response. Later, with everyone properly dressed, Alexandra formally requested his assistance, her cheeks flushed. Harold cheerfully agreed, telling her he would see her the next day. Marion, holding Caspering, watched the exchange with a knowing smile. With their plans set, he waved goodbye and suggested to Marion that they head back to their rooms. They turned and began to walk away from the estate's gate. He had only taken a few steps before he froze, his eyes widening in sudden alarm. His path was blocked by an unexpected figure, Wilfred, accompanied by his own maid. The blonde noble greeted him coolly, calling him Brother Harold. As Harold and Marion prepare to depart, Wilfred approaches with his own maid in tow. With a condescending smile, he addresses Marion directly, asking if she is already leaving. Before she can answer, Harold steps forward, coolly informing Wilfred that it is none of his concern. He ignores Harold's remark, instead making a proud announcement. He declares that he has been officially recognized by Prince Quirce as his new right-hand man. Harold and Marion listen, their expressions unreadable. Harold's response is flat and dismissive. He acknowledges the news is good for Wilfred, but states plainly that he has absolutely no interest in the matter. The comment makes Wilfred's confident expression twitch with irritation. His rival presses on, asking if Harold heard him correctly, repeating that he is now Quirce's right-hand man and accusing Harold of boasting about the position himself. Nearby, a mustached noble remarks that he never once considered Harold to be the prince's right hand. The slight causes Marion to fume silently, while Caspering hisses atop Harold's shoulder. Wilfred flashes a triumphant grin, turning to his maid and telling her not to worry. He proclaims that from this point forward, he will unite the faction and bring great energy to Prince Quirce's cause. His maid mirrors his smug satisfaction. His boast is cut short. With his face cast in shadow, Harold calmly announces that he is leaving the prince's faction entirely. The declaration leaves Wilfred utterly stunned. Wilfred laughs, finding the notion absurd. He questions how such a thing could possibly be permitted. Harold points at him, retorting that if the prince himself agrees to it, then Wilfred has no right to question the decision. The weight of Harold's words seems to settle in. Wilfred stands silently beside his maid, his expression now serious and contemplative as they stand near a gate. As he watches them, Harold reflects on the situation. He realizes that this is exactly how the old Harold would have acted, swayed by Sandor's machinations and ultimately transferring his loyalty to Wilfred. He then calls out to the departing Wilfred, his arms crossed. He confirms that Wilfred is indeed Quirce's right-hand man now, but issues a stern warning. He cannot allow the third prince to do something that would bring shame upon the others. He continued to address Wilfred with a smirk, reminding him that he was widely known as the incompetent evil prince. He questioned why Wilfred would bother trying to establish his own position by putting him down, especially now. With a dismissive wave, he announced his departure, turning his back on them. At the gate, Wilfred and his maid were left standing in stunned silence. As he walked away, Marion met him, her expression severe. She asked bluntly if she should kill them. He quickly told her to calm down, while Caspering, perched on his shoulder, hissed in agitation. From that day forward, a new joint training regimen began. He found himself sparring with a determined young swordswoman, their blades clashing with enough force to send sparks flying as Marion watched from the sidelines. The swordswoman gave him no quarter, relentlessly pressing her assault. As he parried one strike, she immediately followed with a powerful overhead slash, her eyes gleaming with focus, catching him off guard. The grueling session eventually concluded, leaving him slumped against a wall, utterly exhausted. Caspering rushed to his side, calling out his name in concern. His opponent approached, asking if he was finished for the day. Wiping a trickle of blood from his lip, He pushed himself up, defiantly stating that he was not done yet. Seeing his resolve, a confident smile spread across her face. She declared that she would not hold back, vowing to achieve victory against His Highness. Sometime later, a horse-drawn carriage rumbled along a road, making its way toward a distant town. Having arrived at their destination, he sat overlooking a sprawling city, trembling with excitement. Caspering remarked on how fun it all seemed, and Harold wholeheartedly agreed as Marion watched over them. Inside a dimly lit room, Harold expresses his anxiety to Marion. It has been a month since the party, the day of his fated duel with Cedric. Marion, covering a slight smile, reassures him that he need not worry so much. She reveals that for the past month, she has been observing his training and was the one responsible for blocking all of his attacks. His mind reels at her confession. He cannot believe it. He internally questions why she would support him, her subordinate, to such an extent. He recalls the hellish month of training he endured with Alexandra, only to have his 4 ultimate techniques completely thwarted, never realizing it was Marion's doing all along. His shock is palpable as she leans in close, winking playfully. Marion promises that when he emerges victorious against Cedric, she will have a special reward prepared just for him. The suggestion leaves Harold utterly flustered. Sometime later, Harold and Marion arrive at a grand estate. Alexandra Chevalier emerges to greet them, calling out to Harold affectionately as Hal. With a welcoming smile, she gestures for them to follow her inside. She leads them through a large, ornate doorway. As they enter, they find Cedric Chevalier waiting for them, a pleasant smile on his face. He greets Harold warmly, stating he had been anticipating his arrival. He extends a hand in greeting. Despite his inner turmoil and intimidation, Harold forces a confident expression and reaches out to shake Cedric's hand, formally accepting the pleasantries. As the two shake hands, Alexandra watches with a stern expression, remarking that Harold has only just arrived. Cedric agrees with a knowing smile, his tone suggesting he has something planned. After settling into a sitting room, Cedric suddenly brings up a crucial point they had overlooked. They have yet to decide on the conditions for the day's match. The reminder catches both Harold and Alexandra by surprise. He continues, stating that this match is a fitting occasion for Alexandra. Hearing her name, Alexandra's expression darkens with concern, and she flinches slightly. He then turns his attention to Harold, laying out his terms. The duel, he declares, will be a test to determine if Harold is a worthy partner for Alexandra. He demands that Harold use this opportunity to show him his resolve and the depth of his feelings for her. Cedric Chevalier continues to lay out the terms of their duel. He declares that if Harold is victorious, he will not only bless their engagement, but also promise the full support of the Chevalier family for Harold as the next head of his house. Harold, flanked by a shocked Marion and a distressed Alexandra, asks for the other side of the condition. Cedric reveals his terms. If he wins, Harold must personally petition the king to annul his engagement to Alexandra. Before he can respond, Alexandra furiously interjects, addressing her brother. She declares that if such a condition is attached, she will take Harold's place in the duel herself. A stunned Cedric protests, shouting that her intervention would render the entire arrangement meaningless. She is cut short as Harold steps forward, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. He looks at her, asking if she is all right with his decision, before turning to face Cedric. With a calm resolve, he accepts the terms. Kneeling before Alexandra, Harold the Howls takes her hand. He addresses her as Sandra, declaring that he has endured a month of grueling special training specifically for this day. He rises, his expression brimming with confidence. He assures her that because of his efforts, he will absolutely not lose, no matter the conditions of the confrontation to come. Alexandra offers a gentle smile in return. This outward bravado, however, conceals a deep-seated fear. Internally, Harold admits that he wants to run away. He reminds himself that he is an enhancer, the weakest of the De Howls. His opponent is Cedric Chevalier, a swordsman whose strength is said to be on par with the heroine's. Against such a foe, the odds of victory are non-existent. Cedric appears to accept the terms of the duel. He acknowledges that it must be done, and with a confident smile, agrees to proceed. The two now face each other in a wide courtyard, flanked by their attendants. Harold states that while he has already offered his apologies, he now wishes to know the extent of Cedric's resolve. In response, Cedric draws his blade. Harold's eyes widen slightly as he recognizes the weapon. Cedric's personal sword, the Kurinai Bayaka. The weapon is known to possess a top-class attack power boost. Furthermore, its unique skill, Kurinai Ranbu, is a formidable 5-hit combo, which Cedric demonstrates with a flurry of graceful, deadly slashes. The realization dawns on Harold. Cedric isn't merely trying to win. If Harold makes a mistake, his opponent will not hesitate to kill him. With a grim smile, he understands that this was Cedric's intention all along. Despite the danger, he turns to his feline companion. He asks Cass to fight alongside him. The creature readily agrees, declaring itself to be Hal's partner. As dark energy begins to swirl around him, Harold crouches, ready for battle. He stood firm as Cedric Chevalier addressed him, a look of disbelief on the other man's face. Cedric questioned if he truly intended to fight, expressing surprise at the notion. His expression then hardened as he gripped the hilt of his sword. He declared that since Harold had made the decision, he would offer no quarter in the fight to come. He accepted the terms without hesitation, stating that it was fine by him. With resolve in his eyes, he vowed that he and his partner would achieve victory together. As he took his stance, Marion Shearer stood between the two combatants. She announced the stakes. A victory for Harold would mean she would acknowledge his engagement to Alexandra. With a sharp cry, she declared the duel had begun. In an instant, Cedric closed the distance, his speed astonishing. Harold barely had time to register the use of body enhancement magic before their weapons clashed with a shower of sparks. The sheer force of the impact sent him sliding back, struggling to maintain his footing against the relentless assault. He parried another blow, a confident smirk spreading across his face. He understood now, it wasn't just Caspering Sade. Alexandra's power was also flowing through him, granting him overwhelming strength. As this realization dawned, Cedric's blade began to glow, preparing a complex, multi-pronged assault. Cedric unleashed his signature technique, the Crimson Wild Dance, a flurry of strikes descending upon Harold's position. As Harold struggled to fend off the relentless barrage, Cedric laughed, taunting him about the ceaseless nature of his assault. Cedric Chevalier presses his attack, laughing as Harold howls strains to parry the relentless blows. With a mocking tone, Cedric questions what's wrong, clearly enjoying Harold's struggle. He shoves the blade aside and leaps back, creating distance. Cedric pauses, a flicker of surprise on his face. He hadn't expected Harold to be this capable. As he stands ready, Caspering appears on his shoulder, urging him to seize the opportunity. The creature insists that now is the time to use the ability known as Snatch, and end the fight in a single move. He immediately dismisses the idea, stating with conviction that he will not use Snatch in this duel. The ability is a formidable one, a long-range attack that can be executed even while defending, carrying the absolute effect of instant death. It is for this very reason he refuses. He is determined to achieve a complete and total victory over Cedric without relying on such a lethal power. He recalls that this was the entire purpose of his training. With renewed resolve, he declares he will see it through. From the sidelines, Alexandra and Marion watch on, whispering his name with deep concern. In response, Cedric begins to gather his own power, his sword igniting with a fiery aura. A confident, cruel smile spreads across his face as he channels the immense energy into his blade. He unleashes his ultimate technique, the Crimson Lotus Double Slash. A colossal wave of dark fire surges across the arena, roaring towards Harold, who braces himself for the impact. He braced himself for the fiery onslaught. From the sidelines, Caspering observed the grim situation, musing that it was simply Harold's role to go along with his partner's whims. With a defiant roar, he raised his sword to meet the attack, challenging Cedric to try and break through his defense. Their blades met with a deafening crash, the force of the impact shattering Harold's sword and sending the pieces flying. Cedric could only stare in disbelief, shouting that it was impossible. Disarmed but undeterred, Harold lunged forward. His fist connected squarely with Cedric's jaw, the powerful blow sending his opponent reeling backward through the air. Standing over the defeated Cedric Chevalier, Harold the Howls throws his head back with a wide, triumphant grin. He declares their contest over, his voice ringing with the certainty of their victory. His elation quickly fades into a look of mild confusion. Perched atop his head, the small creature Caspering begins to speak, ready to deliver a report. Meanwhile, Cedric rises to his feet and crosses his arms, addressing his sister, Alexandra. He claims his talents are better suited for domestic affairs than martial ones, insisting this outcome doesn't reflect his true strength. Alexandra retorts sharply, calling him unsightly and demanding he acknowledge Harold's power honestly. He sighs in resignation, rubbing his temple as he finally concedes defeat. Across from him, Harold smiles knowingly, remarking that Cedric is still too soft on his sister, just like the enhancer Cedric he once knew. Cedric, now addressing Harold as Your Highness, argues that the final blow was insignificant and wouldn't be effective on a real battlefield. He insists that Harold should have used a proper weapon, like a sword. Harold calmly replies that it was unnecessary. He presses further, asking if Harold is underestimating him by not using his full abilities. Harold turns to face him directly, clarifying that it's different. He is genuinely incapable of using a sword, a bow, or even magic. His expression softens into a confident smile as he stands between Marion and Alexandra. He explains that it doesn't matter because he has his companions. His sword is Alexandra, his bow is Monica, and his magic is Cass. With them by his side, his own limitations are irrelevant. He continues, his gaze resolute, stating that as long as he can protect them with his shield, that is all that matters. Cedric listens, a faint, understanding smile gracing his lips. His conviction is absolute. He will protect them. It is for that very reason, he thinks to himself, that he chose the shield. Behind him, Alexandra and Marion beam with pride and affection. Cedric formally addresses him, Your Highness Harold. Flanked by his loyal companions, Harold simply replies, yes. He bows deeply, his voice filled with sincerity as he entrusts his sister, Alexandra, to Harold's care. Harold, taken aback by the sudden request, can only stare. His surprise gives way to resolve. Clenching his fist, Harold accepts the responsibility, vowing that he will absolutely ensure Alexandra's happiness. At his words, an overjoyed Alexandra throws her arms around him in a tight embrace, with Marion smiling warmly at her side. Alexandra eagerly expresses her anticipation for their life together. A few days after the duel, the scene shifts to a classroom at the academy. Students are settled at their desks, among them Wilfred, who sighs with a weary expression. He reflects on the past, recalling the moment he learned of Alexandra's engagement to the notoriously incompetent prince. The news had made him collapse in despair, believing he was powerless to do more than fulfill his contractual obligations to the royal family. His thoughts continue, convinced that the only suitable match for Alexandra would be someone from the royal family. He laments that the king himself arranged the engagement, believing it was a mistake and that Lord Harold is an unworthy partner. It is a well-known fact throughout the country that Prince Harold is considered incompetent and infamous. He maintains an arrogant and haughty demeanor, fawning over his superiors while utterly disdaining those he deems beneath him. A wry smile crosses Wilfred's face. He concludes that the prince's reputation must be a complete fabrication. After all, during their duel, Harold had undeniably demonstrated the resolve befitting a true fiancé. Elsewhere, Cedric Chevalier reflects on his defeat. He acknowledges that he lost to Lord Harold and, as a result, must accept and bless his sister Alexandra's engagement. His composure shatters in an instant. Slamming his fist on the desk, he seethes, realizing he could never truly bless their union. He vows to watch Harold closely, and if he proves the slightest bit unworthy of Alexandra, he will use the full power of the Chevalier family to tear them apart. Meanwhile, Harold finds himself in an awkward situation as Alexandra attempts to feed him. She affectionately calls him Halsama and asks him to open his mouth. Marion Shearer steps in, offering to assist Harold herself, but Alexandra protests. She insists that as his fiancée, this physical closeness is important and shouldn't be skipped. Alexandra declares that the matter is decided, leaving Harold looking exasperated between the two women, wishing only to be allowed to eat. Their meal is abruptly interrupted by a flustered maid who rushes in, apologizing for the intrusion. When Harold asks what is wrong, she nervously reports that Lord Quirce is summoning him. His expression hardens. Harold dismisses the maid, telling her he understands and will go at once. Internally, however, he fumes at the timing, suspecting this summons is related to the ongoing factional disputes. As he prepares to leave, Alexandra stops him. She declares that if he is meeting with Lord Quirce, she will accompany him as his fiancée, reasoning that the Chevalier family is surely involved in whatever Quirce intends to discuss. He looks at her, a faint smile on his lips. Harold realizes she is right. He had been trying to keep her away from this, but as his betrothed, she has every right to be by his side. It is, after all, her problem as well. The thought overwhelms him. He covers his face, struck by how incredibly kind his fiancée is. Alexandra, concerned, asks what is wrong, but he quickly waves it off, insisting it is nothing. Excusing himself, Harold departs. In another chamber, his brother, Lord Quirce, waits with a stern and impatient expression, his hands clasped tightly before him. He does not have to wait long. Harold and Alexandra enter, their faces set with determination. Quirce looks up at them and speaks, acknowledging that Harold must surely understand the reason he was summoned. He began by questioning Harold's intentions, accusing him of trying to usurp the crown prince's throne. Quirce warned that if Harold was truly powerless, he should stay away from their faction entirely. Harold could only stare, taken aback by the directness of the accusation. The first prince's voice rose in anger as he pointed a finger at his younger brother, reminding him that they shared the same mother and that Harold was the third prince, his own flesh and blood. He demanded to know why Harold would choose to betray him now. In response, Harold calmly began to pose a question of his own. His question cut straight to the heart of the matter. He demanded to know why, despite his requests, Quirce had allowed Wilfred to join their faction. He reminded his brother that Wilfred was the very prince their father, the king, despised the most. He pressed the point, asking if Quirce was even aware of this crucial detail. The first prince's confident demeanor faltered for a moment, his expression showing a hint of surprise. Seeing his brother's hesitation, Harold's frustration boiled over. He vehemently denied any intention of siding with Wilfred, stating he had no desire to be indebted to Quirce. He declared he would not forgive his foolish older brother for ignoring his counsel. With that, he turned to Alexandra, announcing their departure. She quietly agreed. Behind them, Quirce's face contorted with rage. As they moved toward the exit, their path was suddenly blocked. Cedric Chevalier stood in the doorway, his arm outstretched, demanding they wait and questioning if they intended to ignore him. Beside him, another figure emerged with a much friendlier demeanor. A cheerful young man waved, greeting Harold and saying he had been waiting for him. Harold froze, a look of utter shock on his face as he recognized the newcomer, Raphael. A young man with light-colored hair approaches Harold and Alexandra, calling out a cheerful greeting. Harold recognizes him instantly, Raphael. He explains that he heard about Harold's impressive swordsmanship and was called up, so he came to see what was happening. He smiles brightly, a realization dawning on him. He understands now. Raphael must have heard about the situation from Maid. Putting on a friendly facade, Harold asks what his brother wanted with him. The implication of his own question hits Harold with full force. He now sees the bigger picture, his eyes widening in shock as he glances towards a furious Cedric in the background. His realization is met with a direct accusation. Cedric's face twists in anger as he confronts Harold, demanding to know if he's betrayed his own brother to join forces with Raphael. In response to the charge, Raphael simply smiles and confirms that is indeed the case, leaving Harold sweating and caught in the middle of the escalating tension. With the situation escalating, Harold turns to Alexandra, declaring that this is a betrayal and he can no longer associate with her. To his surprise, she calmly agrees. As they turn to leave, Cedric's voice booms, pointing an accusatory finger. He warns them that if that's their intention, he has his own plans and they shouldn't think it's over. Ignoring Cedric's outburst, Raphael quickly catches up to Harold. He cheerfully brings up his brother's words and formally proposes an alliance. He then playfully asks if Harold is hesitant because he dislikes him. He presses on with a wink, suggesting that at the very least, Harold doesn't hate him more than he hates Quirce. Harold can only think to himself that Raphael is only marginally better. His playful tone then shifts. Raphael reveals that his mother is Princess Margaret, the same mother as Quirce. He asks Harold why he would ask such a thing, implying Harold should have already known. The revelation leaves Harold stunned. He watches Harold's shocked reaction, a slight frown on his face. Harold, hand to his mouth, realizes his mistake. He had let it slip that he knew Raphael was a minor character, a fact he only knew from the world original story. He berates himself for the slip-up. Trying to recover, Harold quickly elaborates. He suggests that the disdainful way Raphael and his brother Quirce are treated by others stems from the poor treatment their mother, the princess, once endured. Raphael simply smiles, remarking that Harold is quite perceptive. He waves the topic aside, suggesting it's of little consequence. He then points out that since Harold himself has no personal stake in the matter, there is no reason for them to be adversaries. Harold stammers, caught off guard by the suggestion. Raphael presses his point, arguing that now that the truth of his shared parentage with Quirce is known, Harold no longer has any obligation to stand against him. His mind races, connecting the dots. He realizes this entire confrontation was instigated by Quirce bringing Wilfred into his faction. The memory of Quirce's earlier words echoes in his thoughts. The thought is interrupted by Wilfred's furious voice. He declares that if Harold proceeds with this course of action, he has his own counterplans ready. Harold clutches his head in frustration, realizing that this path will inevitably lead to severe retaliation from Wilfred in the future. He weighs his options, considering that siding with Raphael could offer him a degree of safety. As if reading his mind, Raphael extends a welcoming hand, a gentle smile on his face, and states that he would be grateful to have Harold's support. He questions Harold's hesitation, calmly suggesting that accepting the offer is the most logical choice for his future. With a look of resolve, Harold firmly agrees. Despite his outward agreement, a crucial piece of foreknowledge holds him back. He knows with certainty that, in the end, Raphael is destined to become an ally of Wilfred. This inescapable fact solidifies his decision. Getting close to Raphael now, he concludes, is not a viable strategy. He glanced over at Alexandra, who correctly surmised that Raphael's attempt to recruit him was also a strategic move to bring the Chevalier house into his fold. As their hands clasped, she affirmed that while avoiding a disastrous future was important, she disliked their current predicament even more. With her support strengthening his resolve, he turned back to Raphael, attempting to explain that he wasn't being deliberately evasive. Raphael, however, simply smiled and pressed the issue, asking why he would refuse if not to aim for the crown prince's seat himself. He immediately refuted the accusation, bowing his head slightly as he declared he had no interest whatsoever in the line of succession and would neither cooperate nor interfere. Raphael listened to the firm rejection and gave a disarming smile, conceding that if Harold was that resolute, then there was nothing more to be done. He would give up for now. He then made a surprising offer, telling Harold to call on him if he was ever in trouble, because they were brothers. The unexpected sentiment left Harold stunned, his fists clenching at his sides as Raphael asked to be treated as if he were nothing but air from now on. Elsewhere, a blonde swordswoman pushed herself through grueling training, her face flushed with exertion. She declared that for Lord Hal, she could still keep going, though a brief, tearful moment of weakness revealed the immense strain she was under. Her training partner was revealed to be Harold himself, who, a month after his duel with Cedric, was subjected to a five-fold increase in his practice regimen. As she proposed a sparring match, Harold lay collapsed on the ground in protest. Perched on his back, Caspering prodded him, offering encouragement mixed with a grim warning that overwork could kill him. To continue leveling up, Harold persists in his special training, utilizing the jet black Caspering. With his armor equipped, the size of his snatch claws has grown significantly, greatly increasing their power. His training partner, the blonde swordswoman, observes his progress with a satisfied smile. She expresses her gratitude for how strong he has become, but Harold, flustered by her closeness as she pinches his cheek, wishes she would be a little more careful with it. Their moment is interrupted by the arrival of two maids, Marion and Monica. Marion formally announces that His Majesty the King has instructed them to come for an audience immediately. Harold turns to Monica, asking what the summons is for. Before Monica can answer, Marion offers her own speculation, her expression turning serious. She suggests that the summons is likely related to Lord Quirce. The thought makes Harold's stomach churn with unease. He doesn't wait for further explanation, quickly telling the others that he is heading to the king's location and will see them later as he hurries down the stone corridor. Upon arriving before his father, Harold finds the king already addressing the assembled group. The king explains that the reason he has summoned them is for a matter entirely different from what they might have expected. He reveals the purpose of the gathering. A legation from the Bartion Holy Kingdom is being dispatched to their nation. Harold, alongside Quirce, Cedric, and Raphael, listens to the news with solemn attention. The news catches him by surprise. He had expected a lecture, but this development was entirely different. The mention of the Bartion Holy Kingdom sparks a thought, and a faint, knowing smile crosses his face. His mind races, recalling the world's original story. He remembers that the Bartion Holy Kingdom is the institution that governs the church throughout the world. The main stage of the original story, the Royal Academy, is where the heroine from Bartion is set to appear as an exchange student. The Saint Quirce, accompanied by her follower, the Holy Knight Cowardel. The image of the heroine solidifies in his memory. The Saint Quirce is a heroine overflowing with devotion and love. This is her initial, idealized form, surrounded by gentle creatures in a serene setting. As Harold considers the arrival of the saint, his thoughts drift to another heroine from the game's story, Carla. He recalls a particularly memorable and tense scene where she, bound and shackled, defiantly screams for her captors to kill her. He forces himself to focus on the present moment in the throne room. Cedric, standing beside him, addresses the king with a hand over his heart, asking if they have been summoned to be appointed as envoys for the legation. The king confirms Cedric's suspicion, noting his quick thinking. He explains that while he would normally entrust such a task to either Quirce or Raphael, the sole purpose of this particular legation is to foster goodwill. With that in mind, the king announces his decision. He will entrust the role of envoy to Wilfred, who appears with a confident smile. Cedric is stunned by the choice. He protests, reminding the king that Wilfred is only 13 and has never before served the royal family in such a capacity. Harold, however, is quietly pleased, thinking to himself that this outcome has nothing to do with him. From her throne, the queen voices her agreement with Cedric, suggesting the burden is too great for the boy. The king counters, stating that it is precisely for this reason that Wilfred must fulfill his duties as a member of the royal family. He then turns back to Cedric, ordering him to provide ample support to Wilfred, his master. Cedric bows his head in solemn acceptance. With the matter settled, the king's gaze falls upon Harold. He muses that he may have misjudged the situation with the Holy Kingdom's legation, seeing it now as a chance to bring Wilfred into Quirce's faction. Harold watches, analyzing the political maneuver. As he contemplates the king's intentions, Raphael cheerfully interjects. He addresses the king, suggesting that if the goal is to give Wilfred experience, then it would be best to appoint Harold to serve as envoy alongside him. The proposal leaves Harold utterly aghast. He immediately panics, waving his hands in protest. He begs to be excused, insisting that such a grand role is beyond him and that he absolutely refuses. The king merely observes Harold's frantic denial with a thoughtful expression. He recoils in panic, but the king waves off his concerns, telling him not to overthink Raphael's words. With a decisive tone, the king states that neither he nor Raphael needs to elaborate further. Beside him, Raphael simply offers a cheerful, knowing wink. With that, the king makes his decision final. The duty of greeting the Bartion Holy Kingdom's legation will be carried out by both Harold and Wilfred. The news lands like a physical blow, leaving Harold sweating and defeated, while Wilfred stands beside him with a grim, unyielding expression. Elsewhere, a quiet sigh hangs in the air over a table set for tea. The sound comes from Marion Shearer, who lets out a weary breath as she serves Alexandra Chevalier. Noticing her maid's distress, Alexandra asks what has happened. Marion explains the recent development. Harold has been appointed as a co-envoy alongside Wilfred, which is concerning because Lord Quirce is backing Wilfred. Harold's mind races with the political implications. He understands that this appointment puts Alexandra in an awkward position and could negatively impact their engagement, making him feel like nothing more than bait in a larger game. He voices these concerns to Alexandra and Marion, explaining his new role and his apprehension about handling alone. Alexandra, however, offers a bright smile, reminding him that Wilfred will be there too. Marion chimes in, noting that it would be discourteous to refuse a direct order from the king. Their words offer little comfort. He realizes he's trapped. Everyone will inevitably compare him to Wilfred, and refusal is not an option. Clenching his fists, he resolves that if he must do this, he will prove to them all that he is more than capable. He forces a strained smile and tells them to leave it to him. As Wilfred smirks from afar, Alexandra leans forward with a confident, almost predatory grin, supported by a smiling Marion. She declares that this is the perfect opportunity to demonstrate to the entire kingdom which of the two, Harold or Wilfred, is truly superior. Within a stately office, two officials discuss the ongoing preparations to receive an envoy. One notes that while the order was given, the foreign affairs ministers are handling the actual work. Elsewhere, Harold frets, realizing that leaving such matters to others could lead to problems. Beside him, Wilfred seethes, declaring the situation unacceptable. He slams his hands down forcefully, shouting that their kingdom is being made a fool of by these country bumpkins. Witnessing this outburst, Harold's expression hardens with resolve. He decides that he must lend a hand as well. He approaches a senior attendant, who is startled by the prince's presence, and insists it would be unthinkable for him to help. Harold calmly counters that for this type of work, more hands are better, and asks to take on half of the attendant's tasks. The attendant, visibly moved by the gesture, thanks him profusely. Harold simply tells him to leave it to him, and the man looks on with deep gratitude. Sometime later, Raphael appears with a cheerful greeting, asking Harold how he is. He immediately begins to tease him, saying he heard Harold was acting like a servant and bossing people around, just like Wilfred. Harold looks utterly exhausted by the accusation. Harold explains that if someone like him were to interfere, it would only create confusion for everyone. He clarifies that he is simply trying to be careful not to be a nuisance. Raphael listens with a thoughtful smile. He is then seen confidently addressing two officials. He informs them that regarding the envoy schedule, he has already coordinated everything with Minister Olsen and the scribes, taking the initiative completely. In another part of the estate, the wigged official speaks with Cedric Chevalier. The official expresses his sincere gratitude, stating that Lord Cedric's assistance has been a great help. He observed Harold with a knowing smile, remarking how well-liked the young man was by the members of the Chevalier household. Harold, caught off guard by the comment, could only look on with a questioning expression. From behind a nearby pillar, Alexandra Chevalier quickly ducked out of sight, her face flushed as she realized she had been noticed spying on their conversation. Ignoring the interruption, Cedric continued his pitch, insisting that Harold should join forces with him. He confidently stated that with his guidance, Harold's talents could be put to much greater use. Harold, sweating and flustered, tried to refuse, reminding Cedric that he had declined this matter before. But Cedric leaned in closer, his expression intense amidst a backdrop of roses, and declared simply that he wanted Harold. The tense moment was broken when an attendant called out for Lord Harold, needing his confirmation on a document. Harold, visibly relieved for the excuse, quickly agreed to go. In the background, Alexandra watched with an annoyed pout. As Harold walked away with the attendant, Cedric called after him, urging him to seriously consider the proposal. He then watched his retreating form with a thoughtful sigh. Sometime later, Harold stood among a group of nobles, including his brother Quirce. An official announced that the envoy from the Valtheon Holy Kingdom had safely entered the capital and would soon arrive at the palace. Harold's expression hardened. It was almost time. Quirce turned to him with a bright smile, addressing him as Brother Harold. He proposed that they cooperate to ensure the reception's success, noting that this envoy was unprecedented as it included the Pope, the head of the church, a figure who had never visited before. His words were followed by a sudden gesture. Quirce reached out and firmly grasped Harold's gloved hand, startling him. Holding his hand, Quirce elaborated on his proposal. The two of them should join forces with Wilfred to liven things up. Harold stared in disbelief, the name Quirce echoing in his mind. At that very moment, the grand procession of the Valtheon envoy, a column of armored knights on horseback, entered the city to the cheers of the crowd. He stands beside his rival, Wilfred, as an attendant formally announces the arrival of the Valtheon Holy Kingdom's envoy. The door to their grand carriage stands ready to be opened. Wilfred takes the lead, offering a polished smile as he formally welcomes the Pope to the Howell's kingdom. He introduces himself as the fourth prince and states that he and Harold will be serving as the official reception committee. Following his rival's lead, Harold gives a slight bow and introduces himself as the third prince. A moment of silence passes. He looks up, a slight frown creasing his brow as he wonders why no one is disembarking from the carriage. A woman in ornate armor blocks the path to a carriage, her expression stern. She introduces herself as Holy Knight Cowardel Mio and firmly instructs a young nobleman not to approach. The nobleman, Wilfred, reacts with outrage, shouting at her for her rudeness. As the knight stands her ground, Harold observes the confrontation from nearby. He thinks to himself that this outcome was predictable, given Carla's personality. He reasons that she is simply fulfilling her duty as a holy knight, protecting her charge regardless of whether the opposing party is royalty or a common criminal. He continues to muse on the situation, confident that Carla's proud chivalric spirit would never allow her to betray them. A small, knowing smile plays on his lips as the knight remains resolute, her gaze fixed forward. His thoughts are interrupted by a new voice. A woman in a holy habit, Saint Christia, addresses Mio as Carla. She chides the knight, telling her that such rudeness is unacceptable and commands her to apologize to both Harold and Wilfred at once. Harold's eyes widen in recognition. He internally identifies her as Saint Christia Salino. He recalls that in the world of the game, Tenha, she was the heroine with the worst personality, a powerful supporter specialized in recovery skills, but lacking any unique abilities of her own. The saint turns her sharp gaze back to her knight. She asks Carla if she failed to hear the command, stating that even though the two are princes of the Howell's kingdom, rudeness will not be forgiven. Mio remains silent, her expression troubled. The knight lowers her head in submission, her eyes closed as she murmurs an apology. Watching the exchange, Harold understands the dynamic perfectly. He realizes that Christia's overbearing attitude prevents others from seeing her manipulative nature. He deduces that she is deliberately scolding Mio in front of them, fully aware of the situation, confirming that her personality is just as wicked as the game's lore suggested. Wilfred, however, is completely charmed by the display. He smiles broadly and offers his hand to the saint, who accepts with a pleasant smile of her own, thanking him. Harold confirms his suspicions. Christia's personality is as cunning as the game portrayed. He believes her public scolding was a deliberate test for both him and Wilfred in their roles as villains. Just then, Christia turns to him, her smile unwavering, and asks about the Pope. Caught off guard, Harold can only offer a sincere apology. He stared in disbelief. Saint Christia, with a placid smile, explained that the Pope had unfortunately taken ill just before their departure. In his place, she had come, accompanied by another. The young man beside her stepped forward, introducing himself as Lorenzo to Salvatore. The name echoed in Harold's mind, a shock that registered plainly on his face. Lorenzo, this was the man who, in the Inhaza route of the original story, masterminded the saint abduction incident. It was a grand scheme, a major event plotted to seize control of the Holy Kingdom. This was Lorenzo. As this grim knowledge settled in, Wilfred, with a broad and unsuspecting smile, gestured for the group to follow him to the king's location. Harold, however, could only feel a rising sense of dread, a premonition that a major incident was about to unfold. Lost in his thoughts, he was approached by Marion. She turned to him, offering a quiet apology for her earlier behavior. He glanced over, his mind still racing. He accepted her apology with a word of thanks, but warned her to remain vigilant, admitting that even he couldn't see what was coming. His cryptic words left her puzzled. His attention then shifted to Alexandra, who was trembling beside him. He reached out, taking her hand and asking if she was all right, but quickly dismissed her startled reaction as nothing. The group was then ushered into the throne room, coming to a stop before the seated monarch. King de Howells greeted them with open arms, welcoming them after their long journey. In response to the king's welcome, Lorenzo offered his gratitude. He stated that he was very pleased, believing this visit would foster greater developments and forge an even stronger, unshakable bond between the de Howells kingdom and the Valtion Holy Kingdom. The king listened to the formal address and then encouraged his guests to relax and enjoy their stay. Harold offered his thanks for the king's consideration, privately relieved. All that remained was to guide the delegation to their lodgings, leaving them with free time until the evening's party. As the audience concluded, Lorenzo stepped forward, offering to personally guide St. Christia to her room. She accepted with a grateful smile, but his demeanor shifted as he leaned in closer, a confident smirk replacing his formal expression. But before he could speak further, Christia looked past him, her expression turning coy. She suggested that since the opportunity had presented itself, she would be delighted if Lord Harold would serve as her escort instead. Harold de Howells trembles, visibly flustered as St. Christia clings to his arm. This is a terrible situation, he thinks, certain that everyone is watching them. Nearby, Alexandra Chevalier stares in disbelief. She looks up at him with wide, tearful eyes, putting on a sorrowful expression as she asks if he won't escort her. In response to her plea, he reluctantly takes her hand, admitting that it would be an honor. From behind a pillar, Lorenzo Salvatore watches the exchange with a sharp gaze. Now walking together with their entourage following, she remarks on how wonderful the de Howells royal palace is. Harold, attempting to maintain his composure, simply thanks her. As they proceed, she leans in closer, asking how he usually spends his time in the palace. Christia suggests that since they are engaged, they should spend every day together, noting that for the past few months, she has only been accompanying him for his swordsmanship training. Her suggestion catches him off guard. He realizes with a sinking feeling that she must have disliked that topic. With a sly smile, she confirms his suspicion, stating that's exactly right. Her confirmation leaves him speechless. Just then, Holy Knight Mio steps forward, proposing that if that's the case, perhaps Christia should have a match with her instead. Mio believes it would be mutually beneficial, but the proposal only adds to Harold's shock. Before he can process this, Lorenzo Salvatore interjects with a smug grin. He addresses Harold as his brother and offers to be Christia's opponent himself, shamelessly suggesting he'd take care of her. Christia, however, clasps her hands and declares she wants to witness Harold's magnificent form. Annoyed, Harold clenches his fist, determined to refuse. Despite his internal resolve, he finds himself unable to deny her sparkling eyes. Covering his face in exasperation, Harold relents, telling her he understands, but warns her not to expect too much. Christia beams, thanking him and eagerly suggesting they do it as soon as tomorrow. Having settled the matter, the group finally arrives at a set of double doors. Lorenzo points, announcing that they have arrived and that this is her room. St. Christia leans in close to Harold, her fingers gently lifting his chin. She murmurs with a soft laugh that she will see him again later, leaving him visibly startled. In the background, Alexandra watches the exchange with wide-eyed disbelief. Sometime later, at a formal party, Harold and Alexandra make their entrance. As they walk, he turns to her, stating that as her fiancée, he believes it is only right that he avoids becoming involved with any other women. Just then, an announcer heralds the arrival of His Highness Lorenzo Salvatore and the esteemed St. Christia. He turns his head in surprise, his eyes widening as he sees Lorenzo escorting St. Christia, their arms linked. He internally notes that it's not Wilfred with her, and the situation suddenly becomes clear to him. His expression hardens into a glare, teeth gritted in frustration. Alexandra, noticing his attention is fixed solely on the saint, gently reminds him that while she doesn't mind him looking, he belongs to her. The reminder sends a jolt of panic through him. He realizes with dread that Sandra is incredibly jealous, and his actions are inadvertently causing trouble for the other heroines in the story. In his flustered state, he quickly grabs her hands, his face flushed. Alexandra looks at him, surprised as he struggles to find the right words, finally pleading for her to believe him, insisting that she is the one person he needs to understand him. Her face flushes a deep red at his earnest plea. She stammers, clarifying that it's not that she doesn't believe him. It's just that she knows he would never turn his attention to another woman. She lowers her gaze, still blushing intensely, and quietly affirms that she does believe him, but there's still something troubling her. She confesses that despite her trust, she can't suppress her feelings of anxiety. Harold nods in understanding, explaining that he just needed her to know his feelings. As they share this intimate moment, holding hands, they are unknowingly observed by the king, who looks on in utter shock. The king's shock melts into a knowing smirk. He raises his glass in a silent toast before taking a satisfied sip of his wine, clearly pleased by what he has witnessed. As the party continued in full swing, the king's voice addressed the assembled guests, bidding them all to enjoy the evening. In one corner, Saint Cristia and Lorenzo Salvatore shared a toast, their glasses clinking softly. Elsewhere, Wilfred and Cedric Chevalier were engrossed in their own quiet conversation. Amidst the crowd, Harold stood beside Alexandra, a nervous blush on his face as he held his wine glass, while the ever-vigilant Holy Knight Mio observed the proceedings with a stern expression. While Harold is dancing with Alexandra, the Holy Knight, Cowardel Mio, approaches. She bows deeply, apologizing for her earlier rudeness and admitting she had misjudged him. Harold, taken aback by the sudden apology, urges her to stop. He leans in to whisper that he doesn't mind her actions at all, so she shouldn't worry. Relieved, Mio thanks him and formally introduces herself as Cowardel Mio, the guard assigned to Lady Cristia. In response, Harold introduces himself as well. She smiles brightly, realizing that Lord Harold is completely different from the rumors she had heard. She thinks to herself that he is truly amazing. He appears flustered by the compliment and excuses himself. Seizing the moment, Alexandra steps forward with a gentle smile, introducing herself as his fiancée, Alexandra Chevalier, and thanking Mio for her understanding. She then expresses a sincere wish to become friends with Mio, if she would be willing. Mio seems taken aback by the offer, questioning if Alexandra is sure. Alexandra reassures her with a warm smile, confirming that she would be delighted, as long as Mio is comfortable with it. Mio beams with joy, thinking that Lady Alexandra is just as wonderful as Lord Harold. She feels an overwhelming sense of gratitude for having formed a bond with two such remarkable people. Nearby, Alexandra laughs, remarking to herself that while she didn't expect Mio to be angry, the outcome has been surprisingly pleasant. Her cheerful moment is cut short when Saint Cristia suddenly appears, pressing herself intimately against the startled Harold. Alexandra's expression instantly sours with shock and anger. Cristia, clinging to Harold's arm, declares that she also wants to become good friends with him. As Harold protests, she leans closer, suggesting that this level of closeness is perfectly normal for friends. Just as the situation escalates, Lorenzo Salvatore smoothly intervenes. He takes Cristia's hand, pointing out that Lord Harold already has a partner and graciously offers to dance with her himself. Harold looks on, still caught in the middle of the unfolding drama. With her advance halted, Saint Cristia's serene expression hardens slightly. She remarks that while she would refuse an invitation from Lord Wilfred, she cannot do the same for Harold. He remains frozen, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. As he stands there, Lorenzo leans in, advising him that he has no obligation to endure this just because she is the saint. His words only seem to amuse Saint Cristia, who smiles playfully. Lorenzo grins back, asking if her behavior is a display of jealousy directed at him. The exchange leaves Harold utterly mortified, while a visibly annoyed Alexandra tugs at his sleeve, insisting they leave. Heeding her suggestion, Harold follows her away from the scene, stammering an apology. Alexandra reminds him not to forget that he is her fiancé, her tone firm. Her words seem to snap him back to the present, and he looks down at his trembling hands, clutching a small card. He realizes with a jolt that he is here with Alexandra. Meanwhile, on the dance floor, Lorenzo now leads Saint Cristia in a dance, the two moving gracefully amidst the other couples. From the sidelines, Harold and Alexandra watch, their expressions grim. Harold notes to himself that the difficult dance seems to have finally concluded. As the music fades and applause begins, Harold stares down at the card in his hands, a look of defeat on his face. He realizes he has been completely outmaneuvered. Alexandra observes him, noting aloud that he has never danced before. At that moment, Marion appears behind him, startling him by name. She suggests that now is the perfect chance for him to dance with the young lady. He spins around, flustered, mistakenly calling out for Monica. Marion simply smiles, a knowing look in her eyes. She asks if he dislikes the idea, adding that she had been so sure he would be fond of it. His face flushes red as he stammers, caught completely off guard by her teasing. At the edge of the ballroom, Marion Shearer addresses a flustered Alexandra Chevalier. With a playful smile, Marion asks if Alexandra's previous comment was directed at her. Brushing that aside, she points out that the real issue is Alexandra's inability to dance, not her own. The direct question makes Harold de Howells visibly anxious. He stammers, admitting that he has never danced before and worries that attempting to do so would only bring shame upon Alexandra. Marion sighs, touching her forehead in mild exasperation. Before he can protest further, Alexandra firmly takes his hand. With a determined expression, she looks up at him and declares that if he will allow it, she will take the lead. He stares at their joined hands, flustered but ultimately agreeing. Seeing his acceptance, Alexandra beams with delight. Harold then formally extends his other hand, asking for the dance. With the agreement made, they begin to dance. As they move, Harold reflects that he never saw such a smile from her in Anhaza, and he is glad to see it now. The pair glides across the floor of the grand ballroom, with Marion watching from a distance. As they move across the floor, his stiffness is apparent. He wonders if this can truly be called dancing. Alexandra, however, laughs joyfully, calling him Haru-sama and reassuring him that he is doing very well. Her encouragement seems to help, but just as he is finding a rhythm, another couple bumps into them. Harold looks startled as Lorenzo Salvatore apologizes for the misstep. As the music swells to a close and the other guests applaud, Harold attempts to play off the incident, telling Alexandra not to worry about it. Stepping away from him, Marion approaches with a thoughtful expression. She compliments Lord Harold on a wonderful dance, then cheekily adds that he was unable to hide his smile. While Harold bristles at the maid's observation, Alexandra clasps her hands together, a look of pure contentment on her face. She thinks to herself that another one of her wishes has just been granted. She smiles warmly, pleased by his reaction. Harold, meanwhile, touches the back of his neck, flustered, as he internally admits to his earlier rudeness. His thoughts are interrupted by Lorenzo Salvatore, who approaches with a placating smile, telling him not to worry. Harold retorts that he cannot simply ignore the disrespect shown to the third prince, finding Lorenzo's persistence irritating. Lorenzo's smile remains fixed as he requests that they not interfere with his pleasant evening. He is then called away by Holy Knight Mio. Lorenzo announces that he must depart, as he cannot keep the saint waiting. With a final remark that Harold and Alexandra cannot simply leave either, he excuses himself. Mio offers a subtle wink, silently thanking someone for the timely intervention. As they walk away, Harold watches them go, reflecting that he has at least fulfilled his minimum duty as a decoy. He resolves to leave the rest of the matter in others' hands. Meanwhile, a group of attendants and maids, including Marion and Monica, bow deeply in a coordinated gesture of respect. Their gratitude is directed towards Harold. A senior official steps forward, thanking him for his efforts which allowed the first day of the event to conclude without incident. The entire group echoes the sentiment, leaving Harold completely stunned by the sudden praise. He remains flustered, thinking to himself that he truly did nothing to deserve such thanks. Beside him, Marion Shearer remarks quietly that those who are meant to understand will. Alexandra then turns to him, a soft, knowing smile on her face. She asks if he realizes just how much he has managed to captivate the hearts of the Holy Kingdom's delegation. Taking his arm, she suggests that it is time for them to return home. Harold quietly agrees, and they depart together, leaving the assembled attendants to watch them go. Against a cracked brick wall, Harold Howells sits in a state of gloom, hugging his knees. His companion, Caspering, stands beside him as Harold mutters about how hopeless his situation is. His thoughts drift to the present reality. Today is the day of his match against Carla. He knows he stands no chance against the top physical fighter in the class. He clutches Caspering, trying to reassure himself that he'll manage somehow. Still, he can't believe that Wilfred's taunts have actually led to a serious duel with Carla. His brooding is interrupted by the arrival of Alexandra Chevalier, who greets him with a warm, good morning. Startled, Harold returns the greeting, surprised to see her. She suggests they head to the training grounds immediately to warm up before the match. As Harold agrees and they walk toward the arena, Carla is already there, swinging her sword with vigor. Carla formally addresses him as Your Highness Harold. He returns the pleasantry, and she confidently declares that while she looks forward to the match, she will be the one to claim victory. He observes her, recognizing the overwhelming fighting spirit of Inhaba's strongest knight. Harold acknowledges that she is a pure and noble heroine and decides he has no intention of holding back. With a powerful swing, Carla shatters several training dummies, readying herself for their duel. His mind races. In the game he remembers, skills were just an abstract concept. Here, he can't fathom the blood, sweat, and tears required to attain Carla's level of mastery. As he stares intently, she notices his gaze and becomes flustered, asking him to stop because it's embarrassing. Startled out of his thoughts, Harold apologizes profusely. He then blurts out that her sword arm, specifically her deltoid and triceps, is beautiful. Completely taken aback, Carla blushes deeply. Harold thanks her, and she shyly accepts, while he internally panics, realizing how strange his compliment sounded. This exchange does not go unnoticed. Alexandra's expression darkens, as she concludes that Harold has feelings for Carla. With a chillingly sweet smile, she asks what exactly is going on. Panicked, Harold throws his hands up, tries to insist she's mistaken as he backs away. He sighed internally, realizing he'd made no preparations for this confrontation. His unease grew as he spotted Lorenzo and St. Christia arriving, their presence confirming the duel's significance. They were not alone. A crowd of nobles, including Cardis, Raphael, and Wilfred, had gathered to witness what was being framed as a trial. This spectacle was far more than he had anticipated. He had never intended to stake the kingdom's honor on this match. His only goal had been to avoid being cornered by the dignitaries from the Holy Kingdom. Meanwhile, observing from the crowd, Quirce mused aloud to Wilfred, questioning if this elaborate setup was a scheme orchestrated by either of them. Wilfred simply smirked, remarking on the sheer foolishness of such a plan. Their plotting was of no concern to Carla. She addressed Harold directly, stating that the political machinations were irrelevant to her. All that mattered was facing him in a proper duel, and she intended to fight with her full power. He looked at her, poised and ready with her greatsword. A quiet resolve settled within him. His purpose was clear. He would simply meet her blade with his own. He gripped the handle of his shield, acknowledging his limitations. This shield was his only weapon. As the crowd watched, Lorenzo's voice cut through the tension, officially beginning the match. Carla met Harold's gaze, urging him to ignore the spectators and fight her with everything he had. He gave a sharp, affirmative reply. With that, she exploded into motion, her blade descending in a powerful arc. Harold reacted instantly, raising his shield to meet the attack. The clash of steel echoed across the arena as he successfully parried the first blow. The Holy Knight, Cowardel Mio, lunges forward, her sword a blur of motion. Harold the Howls stands his ground, calmly observing her approach and remarking on the situation. She praises his excellent defense, explaining that she was merely testing him. Harold listens, his expression unreadable. Internally, Mio reflects that she possesses strength equal to Cedric's, and having her attack blocked by Harold gives her reason to be more confident in her own abilities. With a fierce cry, she unleashes a furious volley of strikes. Sparks fly as Harold parries the blows, the sheer force sending him skidding backward across the ground as he calls for a retreat. As he is pushed back, a confident smile plays on her lips. She concludes that he is unquestionably stronger than Cedric, given that he could defend against even that assault. He catches his breath, admitting to himself that the exchange was perilously close. A single moment of distraction, he realizes, would have resulted in his defeat. A smirk crosses his face as he decides to press the attack. Then how about this? He challenges. In response, she leaps high into the air, ready to meet his next move. She comes crashing down with a powerful overhead strike that he struggles to block. She smiles, noting that his movements are too precise, leaving him no choice but to wait for her to create an opening. Her eyes widen in awe at his resilience. Despite the immense pressure, Harold grins, remarking that this is the first time anyone has ever forced him so completely onto the defensive. She seems pleased by his words, admitting she was initially hesitant about joining the First Apostle Knights, but is now grateful for the chance to face such a strong opponent. He acknowledges her sentiment. Her expression then hardens as she declares that, as a sign of respect, she will use her ultimate technique, a skill that honors the name Cowardel del Minio. She leaps back, unleashing her power. A storm of spectral blades materializes, all aimed at Harold. His eyes widen in shock and recognition. He realizes this is the devastating special skill he remembers from his previous life, the very technique she used to fell innumerable foes. He watches as Mio, her expression one of absolute resolve, unleashes her ultimate technique, shouting its name. Shurten Metsuretsu. A devastating wave of energy, shaped like a massive blade, descends upon him. He braces himself, raising his shield to meet the furious assault. The first, second, and third strikes crash against his defense in blindingly fast succession. Mio announces that the final blow is coming. The last strike connects with a deafening roar, but his shield holds firm. Through the dissipating energy, he sees Mio's eyes widen in utter disbelief that he has withstood her full power. He lowers his guard, catching his breath. He knows he was only able to defend against the Shurten Metsuretsu because, in the game, in Haza, it had only one predictable attack pattern. His foreknowledge was his only advantage. Across the training grounds, Mio collapses to her knees, her weapon falling from her grasp. She can't comprehend how her signature technique could have been so perfectly and completely nullified. He recalls that the overwhelming power of the Shurten Metsuretsu comes with a significant risk. If the rules of the game hold true, Mio should now be paralyzed and unable to act for 1 minute. He approaches the defeated knight, acknowledging her skill. Lady Carla, he says, that was a truly wonderful technique. He admits to himself that he, too, is at his limit and can no longer hold his shield. Before he can say more, Lorenzo Salvatore's voice cuts through the silence from the sidelines. He declares the match a draw, but then proclaims Cowardel Mio the winner, leaving Alexandra and Cedric utterly stunned by the blatant manipulation. With a raised hand, Lorenzo Salvatore declares the match concluded, proclaiming Cowardel Mio the victor. Mio herself looks on with a shocked and distressed expression, utterly bewildered by the announcement. She immediately whirls around to face Lorenzo and Saint Christia, demanding to know the meaning of this sudden decision. He explains that Harold did not even attempt to fight back against Mio's attacks, merely enduring them. Now that Harold has exhausted his strength, Lorenzo asserts, this is the perfect opportunity to end it. He continues, clarifying to the saint that the match was for the sake of goodwill and never intended to injure Lord Harold. Seated on the ground, Harold thinks to himself that it is far too late to be told that now. Mio cries out in protest, her voice sharp with disagreement. The saint, however, looks on with an expression of sheer boredom, sighing as she tells Carla to be reasonable. Her words ignite Mio's fury. She screams that if this continues, Lord Harold will be shamed. He is a holy knight, she declares, not someone to be bullied. She vows to defend his honor with all her military might, even as she internally thinks that this is nothing but bullying the weak. She confronts Quirce directly, who coldly tells her to be silent. Mio refuses, insisting that Lord Harold is a strong man worthy of respect. He listens to this defense with a flustered look. Caspering, perched on his shoulder, points out that Harold should be the one to admonish her, since she is the one who has arbitrarily decided he is a weak loser. Unheeding, she continues to shout that if they proceed with such a mockery, he will face punishment. Crouching nearby, Harold can only think how utterly ridiculous the situation has become. As the commotion from the duel settled, Mio stood frozen, her name, Carla Dano, echoing in her mind as she processed the unexpected turn of events. Harold, however, approached her with a warm smile, extending a hand. He thanked her sincerely, stating that he had truly enjoyed their match. His gentle words caught her completely off guard. Flustered, she clutched her chest, her previous indignation melting away as she quietly asked if he truly meant it. He affirmed his sentiment, proposing that next time they should have a match without any interference. A genuine, relieved smile spread across Mio's face as she accepted, and the two parted ways on amicable terms. With the matter finally resolved, Harold turned to Alexandra and Marion, suggesting it was time for them to leave the arena. From a distance, their departure did not go unnoticed. St. Christia watched them go, a knowing and satisfied smirk on her lips. Sometime later, Harold and Alexandra found a moment of respite, sitting together at a table indoors. He looked utterly exhausted as he sipped his drink. Alexandra noted his fatigue, but praised him, saying that he had done very well. Beside him, Caspering mirrored his master's weariness. He could only offer a weak, tired smile in response to her compliment, clearly drained from the day's events. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the arrival of an attendant. The man bowed, announcing that His Eminence, the Cardinal, wished to have a word with Lord Harold. He flatly refused the summons. Addressing the attendant, he stated his decision while also dismissing his own recent match as an act of discourtesy. Alexandra, standing nearby, looked on with clear frustration, questioning if his impudence wasn't a bit much. The attendant, taken aback by the refusal, bowed low. He stammered that while he understood any anger, he begged for reconsideration. This earnest plea gave Harold pause, and he fell into a moment of deep thought, his hand resting on his chin. Harold's mind raced. Being summoned by the mastermind was an ominous sign. He knew that refusing the summons could very well trigger a bad end, a fate he desperately wanted to avoid. His internal debate was cut short as Alexandra asked if he was certain about this. Flustered, Harold replied that he understood and thanked her for her concern. He assured her that he would at least hear the person out, but vowed to do everything in his power to prevent any danger from reaching her. He then turned with a wave, telling them he would be right back. The man who greeted him was Lorenzo Salvatore, who stood by a sunlit window with a welcoming smile. "Welcome," he said warmly. He gestured for Harold to follow him further into the room. Harold, looking wary, asked if Lorenzo was the one who wished to speak with him. Lorenzo confirmed and invited him in. His host laughed, admitting that Harold had gotten the better of him. With a stern expression, Harold retorted that this was no laughing matter and that Lorenzo seemed to have everything decided already. Lorenzo corrected him, stating that this was merely a preliminary arrangement and that he only wished to talk. He began to explain the political situation. Currently, the Holy Kingdom was divided into two factions. The conservative faction centered around the papal court and the reformist faction, led by young officials like himself. He continued, noting that the one person maintaining a neutral stance amidst this turmoil was St. Christia. To win her over to his side, Lorenzo explained, he would need a compelling reason. His plan, he revealed, was to have Christia accompany the upcoming delegation of envoys. During their stay, he intended to persuade her to join his cause. The proposal left Harold sighing in exasperation. He sought clarification. Lorenzo wanted him to approach the saint on his behalf. Lorenzo confirmed this was part of it, but added that what he truly wanted Harold's cooperation for was slightly different, prompting Harold to ask what he meant. He listened as Lorenzo clarified his request. At the opportune moment, he wanted Harold to seduce St. Christia. The proposal struck Harold with the force of a physical blow. He instantly recognized this as the infamous saint abduction incident from the original story's plot. He recalled the details of that event. In a location known as Inhaza, St. Christia had vanished without a trace. In response, the kingdom sealed its borders and scoured every inch of its coastline, but their efforts were fruitless. The saint was never found. Lorenzo continued his explanation, his fist clenched. In that timeline, Wilfred and the other main characters had joined forces to find her, but their search was systematically obstructed by Harold's relentless interference. The outcome of that interference was disastrous. Christia, shackled and imprisoned, was not defeated by Harold's schemes, but was instead abducted by the story's ultimate villain. Lorenzo revealed the true objective, to successfully rescue her from this fate. Lorenzo now made his formal plea for cooperation. Harold, his gaze averted, replied that he would, of course, offer his assistance, but that the Holy Kingdom would not hold back in its own efforts to aid it. Lorenzo's expression turned sly as he pressed his advantage. He pointed out that this was a perfect opportunity for Harold to finally earn the trust and affection of his mother, the second queen, while also noting how simple it would be to undermine Harold's standing. With a flourish, Lorenzo then proposed a bargain. If Harold would accept the duel he had previously offered, Lorenzo would ensure his reputation was clear. A smirk crept across Harold's face. He realized Lorenzo had done his homework, uncovering the fact that the original Harold had been starved for his mother's affection. With this understanding, he made his decision. Very well, he declared, a confident grin spreading across his face. I will deliberately play along with your proposal. I accept this request. He extended a hand to seal the deal, his mind focused. Above all else, he had to avoid the story's bad ending. To do that, he mused, he would have to convincingly play the part of the incompetent, villainous prince. Later, back in his quarters and changed into his nightclothes, Harold slumped over his desk in exhaustion. He muttered to himself about the upcoming inspection at the Royal Academy as Caspering watched him, tilting its head. He lay in bed, the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. The accumulation of fatigue was immense, a direct result of his daily duties with the Order of the Apostles and the increasingly intense special training from Alexandra. He recalled the blonde swordswoman, Carla, relentlessly pushing him for one more bout, realizing with a grimace that befriending her had been a mistake. His thoughts were shattered by Marian's voice. She stood by his bed, informing him that if he didn't prepare soon, he'd be late, as the young lady was already waiting. The realization struck him like a physical blow. With a jolt, he leaped from the bed, shouting that he would get changed at once. At the gates of the Royal Academy, an attendant approaches Harold de Howells, who stand beside his maid, Marian Shearer. The attendant informs him that he has a message from His Excellency, the Prime Minister. His cheerful demeanor vanishes. Harold asks Marian what Lord Salvatore is planning. She reports that after their observation of the Academy, they are to be guided to a specific location. Harold immediately suspects this is a prelude to a coup, an attempt to gauge his true intentions. He instructs Marian to relay to the Prime Minister that his message is acknowledged, then asks if she can handle it. With a confident smile, Marian assures him to leave it to her. The attendant, having received his orders, bows and takes his leave. Turning to the small creature on his shoulder, Harold murmurs that they should prepare themselves. Caspering lets out a quiet sound of agreement. Later, inside the academy, Harold and the other students are told that the institution accepts many excellent pupils from abroad, fostering an environment of exchange that transcends social status. As an official offers a tour of the grounds, St. Christia approaches Harold. She asks if he would accompany her for a short while, explaining that there is something she wishes to discuss. Marian observes this exchange, thinking to herself that with such a heated gaze directed at him, Harold has no choice but to accept. With his unspoken agreement, she takes the lead, guiding him down a quiet hallway with a pleased smile. She tells him to leave everything to her. As they walk, she asks where he is taking her. Harold replies that it is a place where the two of them can be alone. A sly smile crosses her face as she calls him a bad boy. He continues, explaining that while the place is a bit cramped, no one will disturb them, and they can talk at their leisure for as long as time permits. Her cheeks flush with pleasure. She hadn't expected Lord Harold to be so passionate. She thinks to herself that this is an honor and that she must reevaluate her opinion of him. She watches in disbelief as Lorenzo Salvatore steps forward, addressing her directly. He informs her that he will handle matters from this point on, dismissing her with a confident smile as she utters Harold's name in shock. He then turns his attention to Harold, thanking him for his efforts. With a smug expression, Lorenzo reveals that Harold was successfully manipulated into bringing St. Christia to this location. Harold, however, smirks back, calmly apologizing and stating that he cannot fulfill the request. He clarifies that the promised support for the Valtion Holy Kingdom will not be forthcoming. Lorenzo seems taken aback by this defiance, remarking on Harold's splendid performance. His grin widens as he tells Lorenzo to look forward to a time that will never arrive, for this opportunity is lost forever. Unfazed, Lorenzo counters that with the saint now in his possession, things are far easier than anticipated. Before he can finish his thought, a powerful blow sends him reeling sideways, blood spraying from his mouth. The very ground beneath his feet fractures from the sheer force of the unseen attack. From the dust and debris, Holy Knight Mio emerges, her armored form poised for battle. She glares down, roaring at the sinner Lorenzo Salvatore to conduct himself with maturity. Holy Knight Mio confronts Lorenzo Salvatore, calling him a sinner and demanding he act his age. Lorenzo recoils in shock. From behind Mio, Harold de Howells, accompanied by St. Christia, dismisses the display as a poor bluff, explaining that Lorenzo is merely a pawn they prepared for him to use. He continues, revealing that he decided to stop Lorenzo the moment he learned of the plan to abduct the saint. Harold explains that if the incident had succeeded, he would have been held responsible, leading to the dissolution of his engagement with Alexandra Chevalier, a bad end he was determined to avoid. Slumped on the floor, Lorenzo admits defeat. With a confident smirk, Harold informs him that he will be captured to protect what is important. Lorenzo expresses his disbelief, marveling that anyone could so perfectly imitate the role of an incompetent, malicious prince. He clutches his bruised face, lamenting that despite Harold telling him about this classroom that very morning, he was completely unable to grasp the existence of its hidden passage. Harold stands over him, a silent victor. Lorenzo's despair turns to fury. He points a trembling finger at Harold, demanding to know the full extent of his knowledge. Harold meets his gaze with a stern, unwavering expression. His anger suddenly vanishes, replaced by a calm smile. Lorenzo concedes, stating that he has failed this time and will simply wait for the next opportunity. His body begins to dissolve into ethereal particles, initiating an escape. His escape attempt halts abruptly. "What?" he cries out, realizing he's trapped. Alexandra Chevalier appears, sword in hand, declaring that Harold had already prepared the area. Beside her, Marion Shear explains that the place is sealed by the Saint's Barrier Stone. As Lorenzo turns, he sees the entire group assembled. Harold explains that letting a vampire's pawn try to escape was anticipated, and that Monica Ashton had done her job well in preparing for it. He then presents Lorenzo with two choices: be captured or be defeated on the spot. Lorenzo demands to know when Harold coordinated with the Saint. Harold reveals that she prepared a means of retaliation for him immediately after the Holy Knights party ended. He coolly remarks that Lorenzo's promises are not like his own, making the current situation an unattractive deal for the cornered noble. With his escape thwarted and his options gone, Lorenzo stands with grim resolve. His true nature is laid bare. He is the culprit of the Saint abduction incident, a vampire possessing the dark attribute, now forced to use the very skills he had intended to unleash upon the protagonist. Trapped within the holy barrier, Lorenzo faced his natural enemy. Saint Christia, the sole wielder of holy attribute magic in this world, stood as a formidable obstacle, a being whose very existence was anathema to a creature of darkness like him. Her power now nullifying his own, Harold pointed out the futility of Lorenzo's position. With his true nature revealed, he had no chance of victory. He urged Lorenzo to give up quietly, a smirk playing on Lorenzo's lips in the shadows. His taunt was met not with surrender, but with a burst of incredulous laughter. Lorenzo couldn't believe it, exclaiming that something was truly wrong. He never imagined his plans would be ruined by the so-called incompetent evil prince. He then declared that, just as Harold wished, he had no intention of escaping from this place. This unexpected confidence left Harold bewildered. He couldn't understand why Lorenzo was so composed, so utterly at ease in this dire situation. The reason for his composure soon became apparent. Lorenzo revealed a small, dark object in his hand, stating that he would have to use it. He lamented, however, that it was a shame to waste it on the incompetent evil prince. Without another word, he crushed the object. In response, the intricate magical sigils etched into the floor began to glow with a powerful, ominous light. As the energy surged around him, Lorenzo revealed his new terms. He roared that if they wanted him to spare a life, they would have to change their attitude and hand over St. Christia. A sudden crash shatters the quiet. Harold howls, with Caspering on his shoulder, whirls around as the large, barred window of the room is destroyed. He stares in disbelief, wondering what he could have done to cause this. Outside, a colossal, dark-feathered bird with a bone-like exoskeleton descends, its form wreathed in energy. The creature looms over the building, its immense size dwarfing the architecture. Harold recognizes it with dread. The great rook, Vestalfell. Its massive talons extend, poised to strike. Its sudden appearance sends the students in the courtyard below into a panic. Among them, Alexandra and Wilfred point up in terror, shouting that a demon beast has appeared. From his vantage point, Harold watches the chaos unfold with a stunned expression. He grits his teeth in frustration. He had hoped to resolve matters quietly, before the forces of the Holy Kingdom could get involved. But now, with everyone as a witness, that option is gone. As if summoned by his thoughts, a formidable group assembles to face Lorenzo, Salvatore. Holy Knight Mio, Saint Christia, and Marion Shearer stand ready, confirming their preparedness for the coming battle. Before anyone can act, however, shimmering magical chains erupt and bind both Lorenzo and his companion, Raphael. They cry out in shock as Saint Christia waves cheerfully, announcing that she won't let them escape. She calls the technique the chains of the binding god. Harold and Mio can only watch, stunned by her unexpected move. Lorenzo strains against the magical bonds, his face contorted in a grimace of effort and frustration. Amidst the confusion, Harold turns on Saint Christia, pointing desperately at the unfolding chaos. He demands to know how to stop the demon beast, but she remains beside him, arms crossed with an air of detached composure. He receives an answer not from the saint, but from a smirking Lorenzo. The chained noble chuckles, telling Harold that stopping the creature is impossible. He reveals that Vestalfell will not cease its rampage until it has destroyed the precious egg it was sent to find. His gaze then shifts to Alexandra, who now stands beside him holding a massive, ornate sword. She smiles with chilling confidence, remarking on the foolishness of summoning such a creature when the outcome is already decided. Lorenzo agrees, confirming their shared purpose. She stood amidst the chaos she helped create, but Harold's focus was elsewhere. He realized with grim satisfaction that the path to Christia's demise had been nullified, effectively breaking the bad end flag. Because of this, his attention shifted to the colossal beast. He reasoned that there was no need for him to personally engage such a raid boss. The students of the Royal Academy and the kingdom's forces could surely handle it. Despite this logical assessment, a different resolve hardened in his eyes. He turned to Caspering on his shoulder, asking for a favor. The creature immediately affirmed its readiness. With their pact made, they leaped from a high window. Caspering instantly grew to a massive size, landing deftly on the ground below, with Harold mounted on its back as they charged forward. As they raced across the courtyard, he spotted Alexandra and Marion. He called out to them, declaring his intention to draw all of the giant beast attacks onto himself. Hearing his plan, Alexandra confidently told him to leave it to them, a sentiment Marion echoed. With their support secured, Harold launched himself from Caspering's back, directly at the screeching Vestalfell. He met the monster's descending talon with a desperate block, the impact jarring him. A crucial realization struck him. He had successfully defended against the blow. This meant Vestalfell's level was likely 100 or lower, giving them a fighting chance. His brief hope was tempered by a grim fact. He knew Vestalfell possessed a homing skill, an unavoidable attack where it would launch its feathers to relentlessly pursue a target. Despite this, he steeled himself, shouting a challenge that he would lead it all the way to the royal capital. In response to his taunt, the great rook took to the sky, giving chase. Harold, now airborne himself, brandished one of the monster's own massive feathers, repurposed as a weapon. He taunted the creature, questioning what was wrong. His confidence stemmed from a key piece of knowledge. Once a homing feather struck a target, it lost its magical tracking properties. This was his opening.